Good evening and welcome to the April 26, 2011 meeting of the Glendale City Council. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Friedman.
Here. Can we hear your report, please?
Well, if we may begin with the ceremonial flag.
Excuse me. Tonight's flag salute will be led by Councilmember Manukian. If you could all please rise.
Please join me in the salute to our nation's flag. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. A true conservationist is a man who knows that the world is not given by his fathers but borrowed from his children. This quote, as I read it, was attributed to John James Audubon, a naturalist best known for his drawings of America's birds, and after whom the Audubon Society is named. Today is the commemoration of his birthday. Last week we also marked Earth Day, but today, as stated, was another occasion to remind ourselves of the natural wonders that we appreciate upon this continent. From the Grand Canyon to the Appalachians to the redwood forests up north to our own Dukemejian Park right in our own backyard. Let us pray that everyone appreciates the natural beauty of our city, our state, and our great nation as much as we all do, and work to ensure that these natural treasures are around for many more generations to enjoy and appreciate as well. Let us pray that we all act in a way that allows the earth that we borrowed from our children to be enjoyed by their grandchildren and many more generations yet to come. Amen.
Thank you. Can we hear your report, please?
The agenda for the April 26, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, April 21, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next item.
Under presentation and appointments at 3A is agenda preview for the meetings of May 3, 2011.
Spears.
Mayor Friedman, members of the City Council, for May 3rd, there are no business agenda items for the Glendale Housing Authority. For the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, we also have no business agenda items. We do have a joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Housing Authority commencing at 2:30 p.m. Director of Community Services and Parks proposed annual action plan for Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Shelter Grant, and Home Investment Partnership Act programs for fiscal year 2011-2012. For the City Council meeting to begin at 6 p.m. on May 3rd, we have a number of consent items. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, quit claim of city's utility easement to Sofnar Properties on property located at 418 East Glen Oaks Boulevard. Director of Community Services and Parks, amendment to Development Impact Fee Schedule previously adopted on Resolution Number 10199 to correct an inadvertent adjustment in fees as applied to non-residential uses. Director of Public Works, this is regarding a banner request from the Glendale Sunrise Rotary for use of city poles and light standards. General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, this is regarding proposals received to conduct feasibility studies, recommend cost-effective and reliable reconstruction options for Grandview Substation site, prepare design-build specifications. Director of Public Works, this is regarding County of Los Angeles General Services Agreement for the provision of miscellaneous and sundry services as requested by the City of Glendale. We do have one item under adoption of ordinances. This is ordinance amending specific portions of the California Building Standards Code, Green Building Standards of the Glendale Building and Safety Code 2011. And that concludes my report, Madam.
Thank you. Next item, please.
3B is a proclamation designating May 2011 as Bike Month.
Thank you. I'm going to read this and ask Councilmember Najarian to present it. I believe Colin Bogart's going to be accepting the proclamation. These two proclamations tonight are on issues that are very close to my heart, so it's a kind of a special evening for me to be able to give a proclamation for Bike Month and also for Historic Preservation Month, two of my favorite subjects. The proclamation reads, whereas for more than a century the bicycle has been an important part of the lives of Americans, and whereas millions of Americans engage in cycling because it is a viable and environmentally sound means of transportation and an excellent form of physical exercise, and whereas there is a need to promote alternative forms of transportation such as walking and bicycling in order to reduce pollution, decrease America's dependence on fossil fuels, and improve the health and well-being of all people, And whereas the education of cyclists and motorists as to the safe operation of bicycles and sharing the road is important to ensure the safety and comfort of all travelers, and whereas the City of Glendale has been working with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition to develop the Safe and Healthy Streets Plan for bicyclists and pedestrians, and the City of Glendale is currently updating its Bikeway Master Plan, and whereas the month of May is National Bike Month, which is recognized by cities and counties across the United States of America as an opportunity to promote the health and environmental benefits of riding a bicycle for transportation and recreation. Now, therefore, I proclaim the month of May 2011 as Bike Month in Glendale.
Send this to the LA County Bike Coalition and make sure you're not on some holiday somewhere, Colin. They probably haven't seen you for a while. Congratulations.
Mayor Friedman, council members, city staff. On behalf of the Safe and Healthy Streets City team, city staff and many volunteers have contributed to the Safe and Healthy Streets Plan and the LA County Bicycle Coalition, I'd like to thank you for this proclamation. I did want to briefly introduce the team members that were involved in our project. They sat down. There was Mr. Mark Sturdivant from Community Services and Parks, Michael Nilsson, the mobility planner from the Community Development Department. We have Lieutenant Gary Montecuolo, who's here from police. We couldn't be joined this evening by Jono Bogdanian and Fred Zorovan from Public Works, Traffic and Transportation, and Kevin Carter from Public Works Engineering. And I also asked Mr. Chuck Wyke from the Glendale Public Library to come here this evening because they've been very supportive in this project as well. So the anchor of Bike Month truly is Bike to Work Day on Thursday, May 19th. It's really about encouraging people to try biking to work. The idea is that some people will try it, they'll like it, and they'll continue to do it, at least occasionally from now on. For those who live too far from work, we encourage substituting a car trip with a bicycle trip during Bike Week. This is all about making the bicycle a transportation option in Glendale, especially for short trips. It's about bicycles as one simple solution for cleaner air, less traffic, and improved public health in Glendale. It's also about fun. We should never forget that biking is also about fun. We have a schedule of events planned for Glendale during Bike Month in May, and I do have a slide that I'd like to draw your attention to for that schedule. All events for Bike Month are free and open to the public, and they're pretty small and difficult to read, I see. I can tell you we have 2 workshops geared to help people get ready for Bike to Work Day this year. We're going to have one on Monday, May 2nd. It's a bike commuter tips workshop. And we're going to have one on Monday, May 9th. It's going to be a basic bike repair workshop, things like how to fix your flat, what to do if your chain falls off. These are real concerns that people have when they're not sure about trying biking to work. And so we'll be offering those 2 workshops. We're also going to be doing a bike expo on May 4th in downtown Glendale in partnership with the Glendale Transportation Management Associates. And don't forget that fun. We're going to do an ice cream ride on Saturday, May 14th here in Glendale. We're going to visit a couple of different locations. We're going to ride our bikes and eat some ice cream. Details for all of the events for Bike Month are on the website at la-bike.org/Glendale. And people can also call 818-334-9731 if they would like more information. I would be remiss if I didn't repeat the mention, as in the proclamation, that the City of Glendale is revising its Bikeway Master Plan. And I'd like to call your attention to the fact that the first community meeting for that Bike Master Plan revision is this Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m. in the Central Library. The Bikeway Master Plan is a document that will specify where the bike lanes go, where the bike racks go, and other bicycle infrastructure and programs, and will address the details not included in the Safe and Healthy Streets Plan All cyclists are encouraged to attend that meeting. And finally, I have two items that I'd like to leave with you this evening. The first is a new publication from AAA that the Bike Coalition and a number of other bike coalitions throughout the state provided feedback. It's called Sharing the Road, a Guide to Safe Bicycling in California. It's got some great basic tips on safe riding, rules of the road, etc. And then I'd also like to leave you with a copy of a document called California Bicycling Street Smarts. The subtitle, Riding Confidently, Legally, and Safely. This is a much more detailed guide. This is an excellent resource. It's available online, but there's also print versions available, and more specifically, I'd like to call your attention to the fact that you can modify the print version to the city of Glendale if you'd like. So I'd like to leave these with you, and once again, I would like to thank you very much for this proclamation.
Thank you, Colin, for all the work that you've been doing. My next proclamation is for Historic Preservation Month, and some of you here know that I came to politics by way of being a historic preservation activist all around Los Angeles County, so this is a very special proclamation for me as well. Let me read it to you. Whereas the National Historic Preservation Act, adopted by the United States Congress and signed by the President on October 15, 1966, declares that the historical and cultural foundations of the nation be preserved as a living part of community life and development in order to give a sense of orientation to the American people. And whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of Glendale's history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as people. And whereas befitting Glendale's magnificent collection of historic architecture, celebrating America's treasures is the theme of National Preservation Month 2011, which is co-sponsored by the Historic Preservation Commission, the Glendale Historic Society, the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And now, therefore, I proclaim the month of May 2011 as Historic Preservation Month in Glendale and urge all citizens to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. Now, I have Reg Mardian is accepting this. I know there's members of the Historic Society here. If you'd like to come up as well, you are more than welcome. And I'm going to give this to my colleague, Mr. Weaver, to present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. All right. I was nervous a little bit.
Well, being known to be historic in some quarters myself,
Okay.
and a lifelong resident, my 70-some years, I've seen a lot of historic treasures gone, disappear. The famous one that I know is Bob's Big Boy in Colorado. That should have never gone away. There's a lot more, I'm sure. But thanks to the work you all are doing, starting to preserve more and more, along with creating historic districts. So,
Thank you,
great job
Councilor
you all
Weaver.
doing.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Reg Mardian. I'm HPC Commissioner and current Chair. Madam Mayor, I know this goes to your heart. I know you're a preservationist, but I want to thank you very much for recognizing and designating May 2011 as a Historic Preservation Month. I want to mention it's a wonderful privilege to accept this resolution on behalf of the community, HPC Commission, the Glendale Historical Society, the Crescenta Valley Historical Society, the National Trust of Historic Preservation, and everyone who's here in support or was involved in preserving Glendale history and preservation of our architectural jewels. I believe we have come a long way, made lots of progress and accomplishments to preserve our city's heritage and history, and this resolution will further reinforce our preservation goals. Lastly, I must mention this could not have been possible without the present City Council and the past City Council. Thank you for your support. And I have the Glendale Historical Society president here, if you'd like to say a few words. Or no? Nobody wants to say anything?
And you also have Crescenta Valley here.
Crescenta Valley, absolutely. I mentioned that. I didn't see you in the background. I apologize. And Mr. Morgan, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For recognizing.
Okay, next item, please.
Next item, item D on the 3D on the agenda is board and commission nomination assignments. Councilmember Manukian. D1 is for Arts and Culture, Audit Committee, Building and Fire, CDBG, DRB, numbers 1 and 2, GWP, HPC, Parks, Planning, Status of Women, and TPC.
Now, I do have a card on this matter. Mr. Allen, did you want to speak together, or did you want to speak on each of these individually?
I can help us save time by putting them both together.
Okay.
Item 3 is board and commission nomination assignments. Same commission and board assignments as previously stated, but for Councilmember Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council staff. I was looking at the agenda, and I saw that one of the things that was missing was the Civil Service Commission. And in checking around, I found out that there were many different reasons. One, it's not Title II. Two, it's addressed by a charter. And I reviewed all of those, and unless there's something that's hiding, which certainly is possible when there's not enough sunshine, basically the ordinance 2.36 speaks to the fact that these commissions and boards are coterminous. And it's coterminous with the person who appointed them. When that person leaves, each of the boards and commission members that were appointed can either be reappointed or replaced by the person who replaced that particular elected official. And I was wondering why the Civil Service Commission wasn't there. Now, I do understand that there are some hearings going on, and one of those hearings involves somebody in the city attorney's office, and I wondered if that had anything to do with the reason that we aren't seeing an appointment in this area. Thank you, Barry Allen.
Thank you. Can we have maybe an answer from staff? Mr. Howard?
Madam Mayor, members of council, despite the veiled allegation that there might be some misdeed going on here because there happens to be a civil service matter involving perhaps a member of my staff, the ordinance that was adopted that's before you that essentially changed the terms of Title II, members of boards and commissions, was adopted a couple of years ago. It's not of recent origin, number one. Number two, Civil Service Commission is the only charter-created commission with 4-year terms. That's why it's not included, plain and simple.
Okay, I am ready to make not all of the appointments, but some of them, if that's proper. And I
believe that he would introduce them today and we would vote on
Right.
them.
That is correct.
And the reason why I'm making partial recommendations, partial of the commission is currently because I don't have finality on the others. So I will make the commission appointments that I have thus far. First is Arts and Culture. I will nominate Rosmi Grigorian. And Design of U1, I will nominate Brian Ellis. Design of U2, J.P. Baladian, who is currently a commissioner. Glendale Water and Power Commission, Aram Kazazian. Parks and Recs, Barton Garpetian. Planning, Greg Astorian, and TPC Transportation Parking, Richard Espiritu. Those are the appointments for today, and I would request that these appointments be on the agenda for next week for a vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What's next, please?
Me.
That would be Councilmember Weaver.
And I choose to present all of mine in one group next week.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
Next on the agenda at 4 is City Council and staff comments.
Any comments?
Hello again. During my roaming in the city the past few months, I ran across a few individuals who were very upset with the city. And they gave me a letter that was given to them by city's Traffic and Transportation Department, and the letter reads that this letter is in response to your preferential parking petition submitted to the Traffic and Transportation Division in August of 2010. Upon review of your request, the submitted petition contains 77%, the requirement 75%, in favor to establish a preferential parking district as prescribed in Glendale Municipal Code, and the numbers there. The city, and it goes on to say that the city is changing zoning for certain areas, and they're requesting them to wait to determine what the zoning is going to be before the preferential parking is initiated. I remember voting for the preferential parking ordinance, and I don't remember in the ordinance anything saying that if the city is changing the zoning, therefore the work that you've done, the 77% of the neighbors' signatures that you have collected, those signatures will be disregarded until the city is ready to make a decision on a zoning matter that is completely irrelevant to their quality of life in their community. So I would request that this issue not be brought up to the City Council, because it doesn't have to be. This is a ministerial issue, and it should be initiated as soon as possible, because this is a quality of life issue for the residents. And the residents for months went around and discussed it, had meetings, collected signatures, and presented it to the city. And the city's ordinance says if that is true, then the preferential parking will be implemented. So I will not give you this letter, which is the original letter. It's not a copy of the original, but I will make a copy and give it to the staff. So I would, again, it's a quality of life issue for those residents in that area, south of Colorado Boulevard. And I think it's important for the city and staff to take action on it ASAP.
Just to note, if that's the area that I'm thinking of, it was actually directed by the City Council. So it would need to likely come back to City Council, but we'll get the background and provide it to you.
It was enacted by City Council to delay implementing this?
I believe so, but we'll get the background for you on it.
Okay.
But we'll get the background and get it for you. We'll take
Well, I would also like the ordinance looked into, because the ordinance, I voted for the ordinance, I recall the ordinance, and the ordinance is very specific and clear. So
If you give us a copy, we'll follow up.
I will hide it.
We'll find a copy.
I have notes on it, that's why I won't give you this one. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Najarian.
Well, for some good news, I had a great Friday when I walked to school, to R.D. White School, elementary school to be exact, with about 70 youngsters. That was their walk to school Friday. They do that about once a month. We're very well organized by Steve Miskjen, their principal Susan Reese, Kara Sergils, who is working on also the Safe and Healthy Streets program. The kids had a great time walking the 3 or 4 blocks to school, safe and sound. We had, of course, we did have a police escort most of the way, thanks to Dennis Smith and his partner for blocking off the intersections. It was very, very fine. On Friday, I went to my very first gate opening, the art in the, I still think we should call it Laura, but I don't even know what GATE stands for. Glendale's, anyway, where they put art in the unused retail space. Very dynamic and interesting exhibits, and I had to think a little bit to try and figure some of the art pieces out, and I still don't think I got it right. And they're out there. There's several locations, but the one I went to is on the ground floor, right next to BJ's on Brand and Broadway. And that's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
To Quintero.
Okay, I'll start. I want to thank the members of the Genocide Commission and the chair, Mr. Najarian, for putting together a tremendous event last night at the Alex, where we always have it. It was very meaningful and spiritual, and we kind of say it every year, but I think was one of the better presentations that we've done in the past. Of course, the staff worked hard, and lots of volunteers and sponsors. Then I want to talk about, I left early Tuesday, not that early, but earlier than I left the City Council meeting to go to the Burbank City Council meeting. And much to my surprise, I was there for at least 2 hours before I got a chance to speak, so we're not the only ones that have marathons. Anyway, I left early to say a few words and to thank the Burbank City Council for extending the development agreement at the Bob Hope Airport. It was extended to January 2015, and it was a 5-0 vote, which I want to commend their courage of the Burbank City Council. It's a major step. We're continuing to focus on finding long-term solutions for the airport and, most importantly, for the residents of Burbank. We've been having many meetings at the staff level and also an ad hoc committee of myself. I'm the current president. Commission member Chris Holden from Pasadena, Commission member Bill Wiggins from Burbank, and 2 Burbank City Council members, Council member Brick and Council member Golonsky. So we are headed, as I said the other night, we're headed on the right track. For those of you that don't know, the airport is owned by the 3 cities, Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena. Obviously, Burbank takes the brunt of the traffic, airport noise, etc. And so this development agreement is going to let us continue to focus on public outreach and the major, I'm not going to spend the whole evening talking about it, but just a series of steps that we will head in the right direction. I actually see Captain Povolitis in the audience. I'm focusing on him. He was on a commission for a number of years, and he knows the agony that that everyone has gone through. But I see light at the end of the tunnel. I think the spirit of meanness and all of the negative things associated with the airport, the commission, the city of Burbank, the lawsuits, all the rest of it, it's all been put behind us. And as I say, we're headed down the right track. And hopefully we will eventually see a settlement of the issues between the 3 cities and between the Commission and the City of Burbank. So I feel very happy that, and like I say, a 5-0 vote from the Burbank City Council really means that they're on board with what we're trying to do. So that's why I left early. I won't ever do it again.
Thank you.
We missed you.
Sure you do. Well, that's why I'm saying I went over there and and sat around for a couple of hours.
Baker, do you have any comments? A few things. I've gotten a lot of emails from a number of very upset neighbors who live close to the 5 freeway because of a Caltrans HOV project where they're widening the highway. And to do that, they've removed a whole lot of trees. And some of you may have read about this in the Glendale News Press. This resulted in a flurry of emails over the weekend to Steve Zern, our head of Public Works, and several other people. Over the weekend, I had a conversation with our Assembly member, Mike Gatto, who agreed to look into this. Unfortunately, it seems that what we can do in terms of a Caltrans project is very limited. They're their own agency. They can kind of run all over us if they want, which they are doing. But I believe that they have agreed to do a neighborhood meeting soon, as in maybe next week, where at least the neighborhood can hear what their plans are, what the replanting plans are. I don't know if there's still any time to be able to give meaningful input, but if so, the neighborhood will have a chance to do that, and we will continue to monitor this closely. But from what I understand, we had some notice of this project. We didn't realize it was going to be happening now. Somehow it got moved up and we weren't notified, and I think that we assumed that they had done neighborhood meetings, and they hadn't, and so our neighborhood got blindsided. And I'd like for us to try to find a way to make sure that doesn't happen in the future with other agencies. If we know there's going to be a project that any other agency or the county does in Glendale, we need to make sure that either they're notifying the neighborhood or we're notifying the neighborhood. But it certainly wasn't right for people to wake up with hundreds of trees being removed on Earth Day of all times. On Friday, I was unable to attend the gate opening, much to my chagrin, because I was invited to attend an MOU signing between Gyeonggi Province, Korea, represented by Governor Kim Moon-soo, who is a presidential candidate in Korea, who I believe Mr. Najarian has met, and our two educational institutions, Glendale Community College and the Glendale Unified School District. And these memorandums of understanding are for new programs that will be exchange programs where our students will have a chance to go to Korea and Korean students will have a chance to come to the United States. And also some of the faculty will be able to go back and forth. So I think it's going to be very beneficial to our students. I know that there's a lot of interest in both countries to do this sort of exchange. And certainly GCC and Glendale Unified were very excited about this, and I was happy to have been invited. As part of my new policy, I've asked that all of the council members who attend other agencies report back. I wanted to report that I attended meetings today at Metropolitan Water District. The only item that was really of note was a discussion which was tabled about whether or not to allow agencies to purchase water at a reduced rate to put into their aquifers. It may not sound controversial, but it's controversial enough to have caused a lot of discussion and for the item to be pulled for further consideration. And then I just wanted to announce that I won't be here next week, next Monday, because I'm going to Washington, D.C. with the LA Chamber of Commerce and Metropolitan Water District as part of a program called LA Connect, where they bring leaders and business leaders from Los Angeles to Washington to lobby all of the representatives there in Congress, as many as we can get into a room, about Los Angeles issues. So it should be interesting, and hopefully it will be fruitful as well. We're a big city, and we need to have representation in Washington, and having these kinds of face-to-face meetings, I believe, are very valuable and very important. Thank you. What's next, please?
Have one other staff report, staff comments from Community Lead Officer Joe Allen from our Glendale Police Department regarding drug drop-off.
You can just state your name for the record before you
Hello,
start.
Madam Mayor. Excuse me, Joe Allen. I'm a police officer for the City of Glendale and Community Lead Officer of the North Area. I am appreciative of being able to address yourself, Madam Mayor, the City Council members, and the City staff. The Police Department will once again be participating in a biannual campaign that is nationwide to sponsored by the Drug Enforcement Agency to collect unused and expired medication from households of citizens throughout the City of Glendale. We were fortunate enough to participate in this event 6 months ago in November of 2010, and at that time we had only had one location, and it was sponsored in the CVS parking lot at Verdugo and Valley High. We collected approximately 300 pounds worth of pharmaceutical medication and over-the-counter medication at that time. This year we have 4 locations within the City of Glendale, just spread out throughout our entire city. Again, sponsored in the CVS parking lot at Verdugo and Valley High, the CVS parking lot at Broadway and Chevy Chase, the Pacific Community Center at Pacific and Riverdale in the Pacific Park area, and at 780 Flower at the Glendale Environmental Management Center. It is an opportunity for all citizens to bring in any medication that is no longer needed, unused, or expired to help deter abuse and misuse of that medication in their households. The Glendale Police has prepared a public service announcement with GTV6 regarding this issue, and we'd like to present it to you now, if we can show that. Do you have prescription medication painkillers in your home? Do you know where they are? Do you know if they're all still there? The theft of pharmaceuticals from homes has jumped at an alarming rate. They're stolen by strangers and guests welcomed into our homes and even our own family members. They get abused by drug addicts, misused by others, and sold individually in our schools, our businesses, and on the street. Recent emergency room visits linked to prescription painkillers has increased 111%. In fact, admission to drug rehab facilities has increased 400%. Often the drugs used by our younger population and addicted adults aren't being sold by a stranger or some scary drug dealer. They are both stolen and sold directly from our own medicine cabinets. Ensure your medication is secured in your household and any unused or old medications are disposed of properly. Never dispose of medication in the sink, toilet, or trash. While medicine is good for what ails you, it's important to dispose of medication properly. Departments within the City of Glendale, such as the Public Works Department, the Glendale Fire Department, and the Glendale Police Department, are working together to educate and assist you in the proper disposal of your old and unneeded medication. Just bring them into the Glendale Environmental Management Center at 780 Flower Street on Wednesdays and Saturdays between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. For more information, please call 818-548-3900. The City of Glendale thanks you for your help in fighting drug abuse in our community and protecting our environment from discarded pharmaceuticals. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address you once again about this issue. Again, 6 months ago we had a singular location in which we collected hundreds of pounds of this unused and unnecessary medication. We are eager to have that opportunity spread throughout the city for our citizens, and we're looking forward to a very successful event of being able to be there to assist our community in taking these items off the street. So, thank you once again.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is consent items following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. A member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Mr. Manukian.
I'd like to pull 5C, please.
Okay. We have a motion for the remainder.
Second.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero, Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Can we hear 5C, please?
5C is Director of Public Works regarding landfill consulting services for the Shoal Canyon and Brand Park landfills. That C1 is motion approving a renewal to the agreement with SCS Engineers, SCS Field Services, Inc. for a term not to exceed 3 years and an amount not to exceed $600,000.
Yes, this item jumps out because it's a large number to begin with. It was a $750,000 contract that was awarded 5 years ago, and $150,000 of it was spent. And I would like to ask, why are we spending $600,000 at this point? It seems to me, historically speaking, we don't really need this contract anymore.
Mayor Friedman, members of council, Councilmember Manukian, this is essentially an extension to amend an existing agreement for an additional 3 years. What we've done is brought forward the remaining balance to extend it for the additional 3 years, not necessarily using the money, but as a placeholder on an as-needed basis. Currently, we have 3 existing projects underway that have yet to be completed, and because of the regulatory requirements and state mandates, oftentimes they don't move fast enough. One in particular is the closure of Brand Park landfill. We have the approval, but we need to move forward with changing the landfilling operation and converting it to a facility for material recycling instead, and this firm in particular helps us get there.
I understand. My question is, we spent $150,000 the past 5 years.
Yes.
Why do we need to have a placeholder for $600,000? We can have another placeholder for 3 years for $100,000.
We could certainly reduce
Save
the annual...
$500,000.
Well, actually, it's on an as-needed basis, and the money is not tied up unless it is needed. In the past, we've had it set up on a purchase order. It's for the
I
unforeseen...
understand that as well, but
we can certainly reduce
if you don't have
it.
the need for it, why schedule it? You can bring it up again next year.
If I can add, because I spoke to Steve Zern about this specifically, SCS Engineers also does the environmental monitoring on the Shoal Canyon landfill.
I know.
And so what we do is we budget enough money, so for example, if they needed to sink 2 more gas monitoring wells, which they don't always have to do, but they may have to do, we generally...
I'm trying to save you $500,000.
Well, here's the key, though. If we don't, as you'll see from past years, if we don't need to use it, we don't spend it. It stays in the fund, which is all in the integrated waste fund at this point. But if, for example, SCS needed to sink some additional wells or do some additional work in our gas recovery system at the Shoal Canyon landfill, we have room within the budget annually to allow them to do the work. They work on Shoal Canyon on almost a continuing basis doing...
But that's the whole point. In the past 5 years, we haven't needed them except for $150,000. Why do we need to allocate $600,000? Let's allocate $100,000 for anything that could come up and put the $500,000 back in the budget.
Well, the $500 stays in the fund, so it's not a matter of putting it back.
Is it an enterprise fund?
Yes, it is. It's an enterprise fund, so the money stays here. And what Steve noted is it's really an operational cost that if we don't, it's like a budget. If we don't use it and we don't need their services, and they do constant monitoring of our gas collection system, then the money doesn't get used someplace else. It stays in the fund. SCS may need on occasion to sink gas monitoring wells, in which case for them to do the work, which they may need to do in an expeditious manner, we then have to prepare a report, come back to City Council with a contract and get approval. In this way, they have the ability to, on an operational basis, do the work they need to, but if it isn't needed, we don't spend it, and it reverts right back to balance again in the next year.
I'm still not convinced that we should first, the appropriations of it was $750,000, and we used 150 of it. Doesn't the appropriation go back to not being appropriated after the fiscal year is done?
Well, you have approved the funding within the budget. It's included as an operational expense for Shoal Canyon Integrated
For 5
Waste.
years.
It'll be the individual annual amount will be budgeted each year in the budget, and you approve that. This is a contract which it's not separate from the budget, but the contract also has to be approved in order for Public Works to spend the money if they need to spend the money. So it's in the budget. It's a proportionate share annually in the budget. But in addition to that, the contract has to be extended as well, or they can't utilize their services, even though funds are budgeted.
Contract needs to be extended because it expired.
Again, I'm still not convinced. I think we don't need to allocate $600,000 for this contract. Just as I stated earlier, we spent $150,000 the past 5 years. If we're extending it for 3 years, let's allocate $100,000. And if the staff needs more, let them come back to the City Council and request it. But during these budgetary difficult times, I think saving $500,000, or it's not even saving, the money's there, it's just reallocating it is the proper thing to do.
Mr. Quintero?
What other uses can we do with this money? It's in that specific fund, but what else can be done?
Landfill engineering services is what this is exclusively tied to, as well as monitoring. One item that
So
I
there's
think
no
is-
other use in that
No,
enterprise fund other than
it's
this?
earmarked specifically for this. If it's not utilized in a given year,
Who
the
earmarked it?
allotment, it'll be the council's approval.
Okay.
If it's on an as-needed basis, if you will, it's an insurance policy. If we have a hot spot that needs to be addressed immediately, we have the resources available to us to address it. We have
If there's an emergency, we will give you the resources to take care of it. You don't have to have a placeholder for it. That's the issue.
So it can't be used anywhere else in the integrated fund?
Mr. Najarian?
So when you're talking about a hot spot, we're talking about methane gas that's been generated, which is
Yes.
poisonous and flammable.
absolutely.
And detrimental to human life and animal life. And by keeping this money in the fund, we're making sure that at an instant's notice, should our engineers up there need to take remedial measures, that it would be available rather than putting something on the agenda and going through the whole process.
Yes.
So the folks in Glen Oaks Canyon would probably be able to sleep a little bit
Absolutely.
safer.
And oftentimes, it migrates outside of the landfill, and
Migrating
we need
also.
to stop it.
I'll move this.
I appreciate Mr. Manukian's scrutiny of the budget items, but I think there's other places where we can trim and keep our residents at a better level of safety and
Let
comfort.
me make it clear, I'm not saying to do away with it, I'm just saying proportionally. If we spent $150,000 in the past 5 years, why do we need to allocate $600,000 for the next 3? That's the question.
And
I think the answer that I would have to that is that the occurrence of the methane gas is not on a proportional and arithmetic basis. There are pockets that are generated and may occur at random, and like I said, I think there's other places where we can scrutinize the budget and dig into it.
If I may, in terms of using it somewhere else, I'm at a disadvantage right now, but I will be doing the research on that as well, just so everyone knows, and I will not be voting for this item.
Mr. Weaver?
I'll move 5C1.
Second.
Roll call?
Council members Manukian,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Harrow,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. What's next, please?
6 is oral communications, and this is a 3-minute announcement portion.
If I may make a comment, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I have left my car at the dealership and they close at 7. I have to call them to pay on the phone so that I can pick up the car later.
Right.
I'm not being disrespectful to anyone who's going to come up and speak at the oral communication, but I have to go in the back and make a phone call, so my apologies.
Okay, this is the 3-minute portion of oral communications for announcements. Leon Mayer, followed by Mark Sturdivant.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman, members of the council, staff. My name is Leon Mayer. I'm here on behalf of the Glendale Public Library and the Friends of the Library. And before I forget, I think we owe a thanks to Joanne Asman, the owner of Traveler, the famous Trojan horse who she brought to the library Thursday night to be there, to be touched and played with and admired by our children, our grandchildren, and it didn't cost us a nickel. She's taken Traveler all over the world, all over the country, all over the state. $1,600 is her usual charge, and she waived that for the city of Glendale and our residents. So I want to thank her publicly for that. Now, our next event is May 4th, Lisa Napoli, and she's going to talk about the subject of Radio Shangri-La. Now, for those of you who remember Shangri-La, you'll remember that that was the location of the movie Lost Horizon 40, 50 years ago, in which Ronald Coleman was the star. It was an Academy Award winner that year, and it's become famous over the years and remained famous. Now, Shangri-La was located in the Himalayas, and the area nestled in the Himalayas is Bhutan. And the subtitle to her book, Radio Shangri-La, is What I Learned in Bhutan, the Happiest Kingdom on Earth. And Bhutan, again, is located in the foothills of the Himalayas, north of India, west of Bangladesh, east of east of Pakistan, and south of China. And she is a public radio program participant. She's well known as an author, and she went to Shangri-La. She went to Bhutan on 2 occasions. She worked with a radio Shangri-La, helped the high school kids develop their program, and that should be a great program. That'll be May 4th, Thursday, at the library, 7 o'clock. Park at the structure on Maryland, get validated for 3 hours. You don't have to worry about tickets. Now, we have another program coming up on the 18th of May, and I will tell you more about that next time, and that is Leon Dolan from Pasadena, and that's it. And I don't know if that flashed on the screen, but thank you very much. We'll talk about her next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark Sturtevant, followed by Arno Uratsian.
Thank you, Mayor Friedman, members of council. I'm Mark Sturtevant, Senior Analyst for the Community Services and Parks Department. And I just want to take a moment to let you know, and all the folks who are watching at home know, that this Sunday, May 1st, we will be holding the inaugural Verdugo Mountains 10K Trail Run and Hike, presented by the Community Services and Parks Department, with proceeds benefiting the Glendale Parks and Open Space Foundation. The race will bring runners and hikers from all over Southern California to our own beautiful Brand Park for a 6.2-mile run or hike to the top of the Verdugos and back down again. The idea of the race is to help promote our open space, whether it's in the Verdugos, the San Rafaels, or the San Gabriels, as a recreational resource worthy of regional attention. A number of local businesses have stepped up to help sponsor the event, and organizations as well, such as the Glendale Kiwanis, Jewel City Kiwanis, the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association. Our own fire department is a sponsor, as are a number of other running-related businesses, such as Puma, Fluid Sports Drink, and the Runnergy Running Store. And as of 5 p.m. this afternoon, we had 445 runners and hikers registered for the race. So a total of 500 on race day is not out of the question. And we've seen runners registering from as far away as San Diego and Las Vegas. So we think, in fact, we have created a regional event. So once again, that's this Sunday, May 1st in Brand Park. The race starts at 8 o'clock, and even if you're not registered to run to the top of the Verdugos, we welcome residents to stop by. We'll have an expo there with about 20 exhibitors showing off health and fitness related products and items, and we think it's going to be a great day in Brand Park on Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you. Arno Uretzian?
Hello, dear Mayor, dear City Council members. I'm here on behalf of Abril Bookstore to invite all of you to a special author appearance this Friday, April 29th at 7:30 p.m. at the Glendale Central Library Auditorium. We've partnered with the Tekeyan Cultural Association to bring to you author Mark Mustian from Florida to present his latest novel, The Gendarme, published by Penguin Press. It's an amazing novel which puts you in the shoes of a Turkish gendarme, an officer who had amnesia during World War I and moved to the United States and the Midwest, and all of a sudden in his old age, a few things happen that bring him face to face all of a sudden with his memories and horrible events from the past. And Mark Mustian has been a lawyer for the past 25 years. He's the city commissioner of Tallahassee, Florida. We're also going to have Professor R.P. Sarafian from Cal State LA to present a book review. And admission is free. There will be refreshments afterwards. So I hope you can all come. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item on the agenda, under action items, 8A is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding SB1 solar program. At 8A1 is motion approving and directing GWP staff to reduce SB1 solar incentives consistent with the requirement of SB1 and formula presented by GWP.
Mayor Friedman, members of the Glendale City Council, come before you tonight to recommend a change in the Glendale Water and Power SB1 solar program. And very briefly, this program has been in place for a number of years and is meant to incent the installation of solar, primarily photovoltaics, within the city of Glendale. It has been extremely successful in doing so, to the point where we've actually exhausted our funding for the past year, and the program has literally been on hold. So a number of things have created that. There's been a significant decrease in the price of photovoltaics, thereby making it much more competitive. And there's been a much greater visibility and awareness of the importance of solar energy. So we are proposing to reduce our incentives and also to be in line with our neighboring municipal utilities and, for that matter, investor-owned utilities in this regard. So I would like to ask if you have any questions, and if you'd like additional detail, Ned Basson, who's our Assistant General Manager of Customer and Support Services, is here to provide that.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah. I mean, we have no alternative because of the Senate bill?
That's correct. Yes, SB1 basically mandates that over 10 years, approximately $15 million be spent in this regard, which is about $1.5 million per year. That's correct.
Well, then let me just say how stupid that person was to introduce that bill, whoever it was, and for the Senate and the governor to sign it. It's just beyond belief that rather than giving people and companies more and more incentives for solar installation, in fact, we're pulling back. Just that was a bad idea.
Other comments or questions?
Well, I agree with Mr. Quintero.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Steiger.
Thank you.
Move 8A1 if there's no more comment.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Menuchyan,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Next item, please.
8B is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding Phase 3A research study of removal of chromium-6 from drinking water supplies. At 8B1 is resolution authorizing application for an execution of a funding agreement and related documents for funding with the United States Bureau of Reclamation in an amount not to exceed $400,000 to finalize the funding needs for the Phase 3A research study.
Mr. Steiger.
Mayor Friedman, members of the Glendale City Council.
B2?
Oh, I'm sorry. B2 is a motion authorizing amendment of the city's existing professional services agreement with Malcolm Perney Inc. in an amount not to exceed $50,000 to carry out technical studies and project implementation related to Phase 3A of the chromium-6 demonstration treatment research.
I'd like to introduce our Assistant General Manager, Peter Kavonis, Water Services, to give a general update on our initiative with the chromium-6 treatment facilities that we have pioneered here in Glendale, to give some background to this agenda item. Mr. Kavonis?
Thank you, Mr. Steiger. Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. I'm Peter Kavonis, Assistant General Manager.
Raise the mic.
Assistant General Manager for Water with Glendale Water and Power. It's my pleasure to give you an update on chromium-6 and show you how the proposed action fits in the overall research. I should warn Tim, I have a significantly powerful laser pointer, and I'm not afraid to use it. Next slide, please. The discussion outline for tonight is a little background on Chrome-6, a little bit about the regulation of Chrome-6, our research to date, and the funding as it stands today. A refresher on chromium-6, it is a naturally occurring compound, both in both forms, as chromium-3 and chromium-6, but it's also a byproduct of manufacturing and has been introduced in groundwater sources as a pollutant. The health effects of each form of chromium, chromium-3 is a nutrient. It's sometimes taken as a supplement. Chromium-6 is a carcinogen by ingestion in addition to inhalation. Next slide, please. As a matter of occurrence, 18% of the nationwide drinking water sources have chromium-6 in excess of 10 parts per billion. As opposed to California, about 5% of drinking water sources have chromium-6 greater than 10 parts per billion. In Glendale, the pollution of the San Fernando Basin was understood in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was primarily focused on volatile organic compounds. And after a lengthy, almost 20-year-long investigation by EPA under the Federal Superfund program, a treatment plant was built to purify water by removing volatile organic compounds.
Which did not include chromium-6.
Which did not include chromium-6, correct. Brief schematic of how our system works. We have a group of wells that are the north. Those wells are in picket formation to intercept pollution as it's flowing in the groundwater from north to south. And you can see the outline of the 134 freeway and the 5 freeway. We also have a set of wells in the south. Both sets of wells pump water from the ground and push it to the treatment plant where it gets treated for volatile organic contaminants. From there, the water goes to the Grandview pumping plant where it is further blended with MWD water that has very, very low amounts of chromium before it enters our system. Slide, please. As was pointed out, chromium-6 at the time was known to be present, but in very small amounts. So it was not included in the treatment process. It was well below the then established state and federal limits. And as a result of attention drawn to the chemical, City Council directed staff to maintain our levels in our water much lower than the limit of 50 parts per billion for total chromium. Please. State was 50 parts per billion for total chromium, and federal was 100. So staff embarked on the effort to meet that objective and really kicked off the research that's been going on for the last 8 years.
There was another study back then that said that 6 parts per billion was the safe limit. Which one was it? Which one was that?
There was a limit at that time that was rescinded at that time, and actually, the next slide will walk you through a regulatory history. Please. In terms of regulations, again, a refresher. In California, to get a limit that drinking water utilities are regulated to, it's a two-step process. The first step is established by the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. That is a state agency that's on its own. And then the second step, which pertains to our water utility, is the MCL, which is established by the Department of Public Health. That department used to be called Health Services and has been renamed to avoid confusion with Homeland Security. As they exist today, Chromium-6 regulations, there is no public health goal. There is no first step that has not been taken. And consequently, there is no second step either. What we still have is the same limit that we had 10 years ago, which is the 50 parts per billion for total chromium. That's chromium-3 and chromium-6. Next slide, please. A little bit of a history. Starting back in 1999, OEHA established the first step at less than 1. It was 0.2 parts per billion as a public health goal. This was rescinded later on in 2001 based on expert panel review. And since then, there has not been a new one. They have introduced a draft and then revised it later. It was introduced in August 2009 at 0.06 parts per billion, and then revised again in December of 2010 at 0.02 parts per billion. That has not been adopted, and consequently we're not making any progress toward having an MCL that would be a regulation that we would have to.
Do you mind using his red laser? Your green one is bothering me every time. Too bright.
Yeah, where'd you get that?
Is that legal? You have a license to carry that thing?
Pointed at a helicopter.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Nothing at the helicopter, please.
Let's see if this is better. Much better. Excuse me.
Here's one right here.
He's imaginary. He's got a backup.
Peter, there's another one. You got it?
If the screen was 2 miles away, your green one would be fine, but...
Very well. Okay, so it's interesting to note the National Toxicology Program introduced a study of chromium-6 carcinogenicity in 2001. That was completed in 2007. It's still being debated whether the study was complete and whether the results are usable. Nevertheless, that is what OEHA used to determine a first draft PSG and then revise it again down. At this point, EPA at the federal level is reassessing the risk of chromium-6 and has not settled on what is appropriate. Also, you see on this chart a note about the movie Erin Brockovich. That movie raised public awareness of the chemical and really shook the establishment in terms of moving forward with a regulation. What I'd like you to take away from this chart is that there still is no regulation that applies to drinking water systems, other than the total chromium, both at the federal level, which is still at 100, and at the California level, which is still at 50 parts per billion. Next slide, please. The fact that there is no regulation is giving a lot of angst to both federal and state legislators. Assembly Member Campos has introduced Assembly Bill 403 with the intent of expediting the setting of regulation for chromium-6. Interesting to note, there is a piece of legislation right now that says we need to have an MCL for chromium-6 as of January 1 of 2004. That still hasn't happened. So the frustration is building. At the federal level, our state Senator Boxer has introduced the bill number 79 and is also looking at some kind of regulation. As a result, EPA is moving forward with some actions to, again, reassess the risk of chromium-6, provide guidance to water utilities like us on the sampling methods and analysis, which at the proposed very low levels are not well understood, and also to reassess the standards that they have in place now, that 100 parts per billion. Both federal and state regulators need good science and good cost data in order to be able to come up with regulations to comply. And this is where our research fits in. On that same timeline, our research began in about 2003 with a phase 1, which was called a bench study, because if you can imagine a lab bench, the idea was to look at existing technologies, The cost of that phase was $400,000. It looked at the chemistry of chromium and evaluated processes that might have been successful in removing chromium. We had a whole host of partners, and some of that $400,000 was grant money.
I recall in that initial phase study that there were two methods of getting chromium-6 out of the water. Were those methods investigated, and what happened to them?
That became phase 2. We identified two methods that we looked into more detail. The cost of that phase is $750,000, which was all federal grants, and we looked at those technologies as mature technologies that were ready to be tested further. The pilot study, which was very small scale in terms of flow, then morphed into phase 3, which was a $4.5 million phase, also completely funded by grants. At that time, we looked at those two technologies and built facilities to test each of those two facilities. Phase 3 and the operation of those two facilities has led into the proposed 3A, which is the item that's in front of you tonight. We estimate the total cost of that will be about $1.6 million. Some of that money will be spent by Malcolm Perney, which has been our partner in research, and it's to look at the microfiltration concept and to confirm the costs. Next slide will show you one of the two facilities, two pictures of the same facility. This is the WBA, the weak-base anion facility, which uses a resin that's in the vessels in the back that you see up against the wall. The water passes through each of the vessels successively, and the chromium-6 gets attracted to the resin. Some of the issues with that is, what do you do with the resin after it's filled up with chromium-6? We also had some issues with the resin in the initial installation. We had formaldehyde found in the resin, so we need to understand how that works and make sure that that doesn't happen. The second facility on the next slide is the reduction coagulation filtration process. This works by taking chromium-6, making it into chromium-3, and then taking that out of the water, in which case we still have some solids to dispose of, and we're looking at how do you dispose those solids and what are the costs and risks associated with that. Next slide, please.
I have a quick question. There's no industrial use for chromium-6 or chromium-3?
Chromium-3, again, is a nutrient. We're not aware of any technology that would allow us to capture those on their own and possibly remarket them. At this point, we're looking at them as a waste of the process. In conclusion of that phase 3, both technologies are successful. Our concentrations coming into the system are 80 parts per billion, and in the south wells, approximately 40 parts per billion. Both technologies take that water and reduce it to less than 5 parts per billion, which was the City Council's direction for how much to have in our system. Both technologies have some issues that need a little more research and understanding. And the recent press about chromium-6 has raised questions whether we can get to the proposed draft PHG, which is set at a very low level. It's so much lower than the 5 parts per billion, so the question is, can we do that? Next slide, please. So in light of that, it's important to study an additional process called microfiltration, that would take the effluent, especially from the reduction coagulation filtration process, and put it through yet another filtration. And it's very important for both state and federal regulators to calculate the cost of this treatment process. Our research is guided by a project advisory committee that's made up of the who's who in the water quality world. We have doctors from Metropolitan Water District, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, EPA, Department of Public Health, East Bay Mud, a really creme de la creme of advisors, and they suggested that we proceed with Phase 3A to accomplish the two objectives of studying microfiltration and capturing the cost. We're looking at, again, how do we change out the resin so we don't have the issues with formaldehyde? How do we optimize the operation of the reduction coagulation filtration process and test microfiltration? And developing cost curves. You see a sample of what the cost curves would look like, where for different sizes of a system, you would understand what the cost is depending on the concentration of the chromium-6 coming into the system. And we're looking at this research not just to help Glendale, which will solve our problem, but also to add value to the entire drinking water industry. So in this particular case, this would be data that others could use in solving their problem and regulators would use to set a regulation. So phase 3A will cost at the end about $1.6 million, and a portion of this, about $50,000, would be done by Malcolm Purtney, which is the second part of the action in front of you tonight. To fund it, we've negotiated with the state, the Department of Water Resources, and they've agreed to provide $800,000 as part of Proposition 50 as a grant to the research, grant to the city. The industry group has agreed to provide $250,000. The Water Research Foundation has agreed to provide $150,000, and the $400,000, that is the grant that we're looking to apply for with your approval, would complete the local match of $800,000 for the state's $800,000, and would bring the total to $1.6 million. It's very good for us to have Metropolitan Water District as our partner. We asked for them to help us with this $400,000. They set their grant-seeking staff to help us find this grant, and this grant appears to be tailor-made for this research. We have very high expectation, although I can't promise that we'll get it. But it's very good to work with their grant writers, and we may be looking to them for some legislative assistance with getting a favorable review of our grant application.
I just wanted to break in and make sure the public understands the industry group that's going to contribute that small amount of money. Those are the original polluters like Lockheed and all of the other aerospace companies that polluted the entire San Fernando Valley. Just to make sure, industry group means or equals polluters that set this whole thing in motion.
In terms of the future of our research, once Phase 3A is completed, we would look for additional grant monies. We believe that this should not cost Glendale residents anything. We believe that we ought to be able to meet the challenge and offer value to the industry, but not do it on the back of our ratepayers. And so one of the concepts that may be coming up in the future is to look for other resins other than the one we've already tested. And if we're to move forward with that, we'd come back with additional grant monies to help fund that effort. Next slide, please. I'd like to leave you with some key points. Our research effort over the last 8 years is leading edge. It's the only research of its kind in the nation. It's very credible and viewed with very high credibility by all water industry associations as well as the regulators who look to these results in order to get the regulations established. It's nearly entirely grant funded and has been very fruitful in giving good results so far. Department of Public Health and EPA need the results and are very supportive of the effort, and we're very happy that MWD is now engaged and on board with us. They hadn't been as much. So with that, I'll show you very briefly in the next slide a long list of people that have been involved in the research. I won't read all the names, but this is not a simple project. It's taken a lot of collaboration by many people over time, and I'll be happy to open it to questions.
Questions?
I have not had a drink of tap water since 2002. I can assure you that, since I found out about this issue back then. And I want to emphasize to the community the issue that we're facing, and to me this is the most important safety issue for the city of Glendale and the residents of Glendale as far as I'm concerned. I also want to remind them that the chromium-6 can be ingested as well as inhaled. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it can be inhaled when it's in vapor form.
I believe the regulation for inhalation did not pertain to vapor form. I believe it pertained to airborne.
How does it get airborne, and how does it get inhaled? Let's say
if a worker is exposed to plating activities.
What about hot water at home?
I believe that the vapor form is not what creates the inhalation hazard.
Okay, next question is, and I recall back then when we were struggling with this issue, and we went through a whole host of issues with Water Czar, was it called?
Water Master.
Right.
The Water Master and
right.
EPA.
We agreed to a blended rate to reduce the amount of chromium-6 in our drinking water. What has happened since then, And what is our current blended rate for our tap water in terms of chromium-6?
We have managed to maintain our good relations with the water master. We are not pumping and wasting any water. We are pumping, treating the water, and after blending it, put it in the system. Again, the concentrations coming out of the wells are 80 and 40 parts per billion. After treatment and blending, we are at
we have 2 wells that are coming out that much. Was it 2 wells or all of them?
Those are the high wells. I believe 6 of the 8 wells have chromium in them. The high wells are 80 and about 40, and it fluctuates over time. And as that fluctuates, so does what goes into our system. Our target is 5 parts per billion,
right.
And we're very good at making that, at staying below the 5.
Are we staying below the 5?
Yes.
I'm certainly in favor of this, as I said, and I will make the motion. As I said, for me, this is one of the most important safety issues for the city of Glendale. It's just unfortunate that it's taking so long to resolve this issue, and as you said, it's one of a kind in the nation. So I appreciate all the work that's been done, but I also want it to be done sooner. So
Peter,
I'll make the motion.
I have a question for you. Mr. Manukian made me think. Is that bottled water have less chromium-6? Do we have any way of knowing how much chromium-6 is in bottled water?
That depends on the source of the bottled water. If you drink MWD water has some chromium in it.
But do they test the bottled water for chromium levels?
I'm not sure. I know the bottled water is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, not the Department of Public Health.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's not, that they don't test for chromium-6 or any of those controlled, because it is regulated by the FDA, and drinking water is held to a higher standard. So I don't want to make you nervous.
No,
but
you're making...
I also just wanted to add that Metropolitan MWD is very supportive of this. All of the member agencies are very supportive, because a lot of the member agencies in Metropolitan, maybe even all of them, have chromium-6 issues, and they're really looking to Glendale to help be the solution and to find the solution. So they're supportive, and we really are doing very cutting-edge research here that could help the entire region. Mr. Quintero.
I want to commend the staff and you in particular, Peter. I think you've done a tremendous job of doing everything that you can to try to take a positive step forward, and working with water masters and everybody, EPA, everyone else that you work with. But it's a horrible situation. There's just no question about it. And once again, it's my opinion that the industry group got off real easily. I just think they weren't really made to pay for what they did. And I mentioned Lockheed, but from North American Rockwell, whoever was Teledyne, all the rest of them, they just really. And what's so interesting, of course, is that most of this group has actually physically moved out of the valley and out of Glendale and Burbank, and are now housed in other states and other locations. But we're here holding the bag. But anyway, good work on your part, and I'm very happy to read what I've read in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero. And if it soothes your mind at all, the EPA has begun a chromium-6 Superfund effort, and they are looking to identify those that have polluted specifically with chromium-6, which has not been the case to date. We've been encouraging them to do that for some time, and we believe that we're going to get a group of identified polluters that will be responsible for paying for a long-term solution. At this point, we're operating these treatment plants with grant monies. Our plan is to get the polluters on the hook to pay for the continuous operation of these plants and more if need be.
Okay.
I've made a motion.
Second.
Have a roll call, please.
Yes, 1 and 2.
Council members: Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
8C is Fire Chief regarding Los Angeles Regional Interoperable Communications System, LA RICS. C1 is resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a temporary professional services agreement with Steve Howard.
Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman and members of the council. Tonight you have before you a temporary services agreement for retired employee Steve Howard to be a part of the negotiating team for the LA RICS project. That's Los Angeles Regional Interoperable Communication System. And what that is an idea that's actually starting to grow for a regional interoperable system with voice and data to cover as an overlay of the 4,100 square miles of LA County. Throughout the entire process that's been going on now for a few years, it's been very difficult for agencies to have participation in the system because of the time commitment. Now they're in the negotiations phase with a vendor, and it could be between $600 and $1 billion project. This is important to us because as Verdugo Dispatch and as part of the ISIS JPA, we have a significant interest in this project. What you have in the report is we estimate it may cost approximately $75,000 to fund Steve Howard's position, but Glendale's portion would be approximately $8,700 because it's being split through the contribution of 18 independent cities who also have an interest in this. It's a critical time now because once the negotiations are closed with the vendor, if they choose to sign an agreement, and they expect that to be around July, we'll then have 45 days to be in or out of the LA RICS project. So this is a significant project that's growing for the region. It's important for us because at some point in time, we're going to either need to make a major investment to replace our existing radio and data system, or we're going to be able to join in a county-wide regional system. So Steve Howard's participation on this negotiating team will provide us insight once the negotiations close, and it'll help us make a critical decision, as well as many other independent cities who are part of this LA RICS program right now.
Okay. Questions? Mr. Najarian.
Chief, you said Mr. Howard is retired?
Yes.
From the city of Glendale?
Yes.
You know what I'm thinking?
I know exactly what you're thinking. And if I can explain.
Why don't you explain, and then Mr. Starbird had his hand up as well.
I think we're both trying to explain the same thing. So let me go first, if I can. All of the cities that are currently participating, and a call was actually put out to the other independent cities in Los Angeles County, asking any of them if they had an individual who was willing to serve in this capacity. Among the various fire departments, the problem is the time commitment of the individual to do it. So with that, Chief and I discussed it, and he suggested Steve Howard, who is very versed in this. Steve Howard, who is retired from Glendale Fire Department, has the time, the willingness, the availability, and frankly the knowledge, because he's been connected to Verdugo with this project in the past. We made all the other agencies aware of it, asked them if they had anybody they'd like to propose, and literally nobody did. And so everybody was comfortable with Steve Howard's qualifications in playing the role. It could have been any other agency. If anybody had a full-time person, we would have supported reimbursing them for the cost. But there wasn't another fire agency that could commit the kind of time necessary for the next 6 months to do this. For that reason, Steve Howard is a very good choice. He is retired. The rate he's proposed is less than the position he previously held with the city. It does not incorporate benefit costs. It's a straight salary rate capped at a maximum hours per week, regardless of how many hours he actually has to put in. And I'll note that for the 6 months, Glendale's cost is estimated at $8,700. And all the other, I've given you a list of the other 17 cities and the proportionate share that they carry. I will note, just an aside here, one of the cities on the list, these cities are principally independent cities that have either a full police department or fire department or both. In one case, Santa Clarita, they have neither. But they view this as being important enough that they volunteer to step up and also pick up their proportionate share, even though they're not technically considered an independent city, because they have neither a police department nor a fire department. That shows the level of commitment among the cities and the importance of this long-term for the public agencies, not just police and fire, but for those of us that have significant public works and utility operations. This also is very important to them. And this gives us a seat at the table and input into the evaluation and negotiations with what will likely be the successful vendor through the county and LA City for implementation of the system.
We're and Steve Howard is a great guy. He served the city very well. And I guess it's this council meeting that's sandwiched between two budget study sessions that causes this question really to be at the forefront of my thoughts. So I don't want to beat anybody up today. I'll do that during the study session tomorrow. But my next question is, moving on to something more policy level, is we are also pursuing our own ISIS system. I mean, we're still in that, are we not, with our other group of cities? So aren't we taking a contradictory role? Is there no conflict between us placing our man on the LA RICS board, but at the same time, we're fighting like hell against LA RICS? I know in Washington, I go to Washington and I say that LA RICS system is for the birds. ISIS is proven, it's on the ground, it's working, it's technology that we're using today. The LA RICS system is junk. That's what I say. I don't know what you guys say, but isn't that a problem that we have?
I say the same thing.
It's a problem that we're working through. One of the components of the system that will be built out one day, it may be an opportunity for us to fold into that existing system that grows out of the ground with what we have because of our P25 compliance in that world. So it's important for us to have that understanding. At some point, we're going to have to replace our voice and our data system. And so far, LA RICS has gained momentum. They have approximately $150 million grant for a data system to be built that was given by the federal government. They have approximately $120 million in grant funds to start moving this project out of the ground. So they would like all 34,000 first responders to be a part of this system, including us. But another way for us to become a part of the system may be to fold ISIS into the system. For us, we have to have a better understanding of all the aspects of the processes to be able to make that conscious decision, because it's going to be coming quick for us. And we don't know how it's going to be funded, but at least the City of Glendale will have the best information possible to be able to make a good decision as we move forward into the future with our communication system. I believe ISIS is the best system working out there. I know that, but I know new technologies are emerging, and I don't know what's going to be in this new system, so we don't know if we should be a part of it yet, but we should be a part of the process to be able to make a good decision at the end of the day.
If I can, at some point, the county and LA City will ask all of us independent cities to join this system. And we'll need to make a decision then whether we join the system and abandon ISIS, whether we somehow link ISIS to their system, or whether we go it alone. What has happened is we've tried not to portray ISIS as being in competition with the broader county-wide system, because ISIS can't meet the needs of the entire county. And frankly, the 8,000-pound gorilla is LA County in this effort. But what we have noticed over time is, because of the tendency of the county to take more and more and more time in this process, more and more independent cities are having to make decisions about replacing their radio systems. And frankly, what's happening is they're finding the most viable option is to turn to ISIS. I'll give you an example. The city of Santa Monica is now evaluating whether or not to join ISIS, a key city over on the west side that frankly would be a great addition to ISIS. I think in time we're going to see more and more of the cities you see on this list in particular evaluating realistically the value of joining the ISIS system, because it's there, it's immediate, the technology is proven, and the cost is likely far less than what we're going to see in the LA RICS County system. But as the Chief points out, for now, we independent cities need to have a place at the table. Or frankly, the evaluation will be done, the firm will be picked, and then we'll be wondering what went into that evaluation. This is an opportunity to have a person who represents the independent cities at the table, behind the closed doors, aware of that whole evaluation. So from a dollar standpoint, spreading the cost among the 18 cities really makes it, I think, a very worthwhile investment for not just the ISIS cities in Glendale, but all the independent cities in the county. That's why there's been such a really positive reaction from even those cities that are not part of ISIS.
And if I can make one additional point, we don't have the information to evaluate. Everyone that's a part of that negotiation team has signed non-disclosure agreements, so they can't even talk about the information. As the president of the LA Area Fire Chiefs currently, I serve on the JPA for LA RICS, and I haven't been able to view the information. That's how closed it is. This entire system is closed, and the team was loaded with Los Angeles City and Los Angeles County representatives. There were no representatives from the independent cities on this negotiating team. So we felt that our interests were not being met on that negotiations team.
Okay, I have a card. Let me go to the public. Mr. Mnuchin?
Yes. In terms of the cost, our Glendale's, and I'm reading the report here, the Glendale share is $87.75.
Yes.
And the contract will extend over 2 fiscal years. However, here it says in parentheses, $37,500 will be encumbered in fiscal year 2010, 11, and 11 and 12. My calculations, 2 times 87.75 is 17,550, not 37,500.
Glendale volunteered to be the lead agency, so we'll be billing the other cities on a monthly basis for their shares. So we budget it, we get reimbursed for everything, but when the 6 months is over, our cost will be, we expect, even less than $87.75 because we'll get reimbursed from other cities. The other cities have all agreed to pick up their proportionate shares.
And what is this then? Shouldn't we be billing $75,000 and then getting reimbursed instead of $37,500?
Well, we have to appropriate the money because we will be paying Steve Howard, and we'll be getting our cost.
Is it $37,500 a year or $75,000?
No, it's the 6-month period goes past July 1, so we figure half of it in the next fiscal year, half of it in this fiscal year. Total cost not to exceed $75,000, but half this fiscal year, half next fiscal year.
Why are we the lead agency and not L.A.?
Well, L.A., frankly, they didn't care whether we had somebody there or not.
Right.
They offered to allow us to have somebody, and I happened to be at the meeting, and because we're a rather prominent city in ISIS, I volunteered to solicit support from other cities to support a representation on it. And we've gotten, frankly, a very good response from cities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have one card. Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm Barry Allen. The issue here isn't so much as Glendale is going to be a part of this or not part of it. The issue really is the double dipping. Even though it's $8,700, you have a former fire person who is well into the 100,000 club of CalPERS, and I would think it would be great to see Steve Howard come back and actually volunteer to put in his time. Now, other than that, recently, the former council created a new deputy fire chief, and there's no reason why that deputy fire chief can't do the job and negotiate. Now, if he can't, I would imagine that of the 60 people in redevelopment agency that are being looked at to put in other positions in the city, certainly there could be a great negotiator there. Or maybe one of the best negotiators would be the captain who is the fire captain who is the president of the firefighters union. And possibly because he has negotiated so well with the city, he may well be able to negotiate very well with this group. And I really think that the issue is giving more money to someone who is already tapping the till. Double dipping. We've seen it in the police department. Retiring people come back and work for their period of time to get even more money. I think it's time to stop. I listened to Mr. Najarian on Monday, and I agree. It's time to stop. We've created a whole bunch of new deputy department heads, and that costs a lot of money. And when we look at the end of the year with what's left over in whatever bucket it may be, we can reallocate those funds for more payroll. And I think you'll find that with the City Council, you're going to find a lot more new middle managers and managers coming up with a lot more consultants doing the work. Thank you. I'm Barry Allen.
Thank you.
Mayor, one more discussion. I'll move 8C1.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a roll call, please.
Council members: Mnuchin, Najarian,
Abstain.
Carroll,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Friedman.
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item at 8D is the city attorney regarding options for amendments to the ethics and campaign finance regulations, including lobbyist regulations, office holder accounts, limits on subcontractor contributions, and disclosure requirements. At D1 is a motion providing direction to staff.
Thank you. Going to Mr. Howard.
Madam Mayor, members of council, let me first off apologize. I feel a little deja vu here. Back when this council had requested a report on possible campaign finance regulations, I provided you with a report just loaded with a whole host of issues. 3 reports, and at least a year later, we were able to hone it down to a point where the council was able to get its arms around it and adopt a campaign finance regulation ordinance. I feel a little like that tonight because of individual conversations I've had, statements that have been made from the dais. I've tried to pick up a number of those issues to put them in here. So I'm hoping that I'm not overloading you. There are 10 distinct issues, and how you want to handle those, I'm prepared to go through all 10 of those tonight at any level of detail you like, and I'm certainly prepared to start now. But I wanted to give that brief caveat because I know we've kind of done this before, and it did take us a while to begin to hone down the very specific issues that you want to deal with. So I'm prepared at your leisure to really go through this in some depth, or to highlight them. I tried to make the report more of an executive summary with some specifics. I have one specific recommendation. The rest are really policy considerations based upon not only some of the issues that have been raised here at the dais, but some of the situations that have occurred involving advanced development investment and the whole issue of subcontractor campaign contributions. Likewise, the legislation that's been adopted in Pasadena, Measure B, the recent adoption of Measure H in Los Angeles. So, again, at your leisure, I'll be prepared to dive into these one at a time in the order that's presented in the report, or any order you wish. Or you can tell me to come back and hone it down, and I certainly can do that as well and bite off a smaller piece.
Mr. Weaver, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any, pretty thick, a lot in this. Do we want to break it into 2 parts, handle one part tonight, the next part next week or something? I don't know what anybody thinks.
There is quite a bit in here, and I know we've been piling our suggestions on Mr. Howard for the past year and a half per se. And I don't want to spend here all night, but I do want to have a full discussion on the issues that we do take up, rather than feel compressed by time to zip through it. So is there can we split this into 2? Is there an ethics portion and a campaign finance issue that we could logically separate?
Well, yeah.
What would you suggest?
The reason for the generalized categories of ethics and campaign is because ultimately any one of these and all of them will fit within those 2 with the appropriate subheadings and provisions. For example, office holder accounts would be part of a campaign financing regulation. Lobbyist registration can cover both. It's an accountability and transparency issue. Subcontractor disclosure can fit into both. If it's campaign contribution limits for subcontractors, that would kind of fall over into the campaign financing. So some of them do splash over into both. Perhaps that's not the best way to divide them. We could look at maybe we could look at the campaign contribution limitations. For example, Measure B and Measure H, office holder accounts, defense funds. If you want to limit subcontractor campaign contributions, those and candidate loans and the fundraising deadlines, along with the contribution formula, could be put into campaigns. And then you have lobbyists, which I think is a matter in and of itself. And the other issue of bundling.
Maybe we could agree to pull out the lobbying, move it to a date certain, because that is something isolated. But I'm uncomfortable separating campaign issues from ethics issues because they're so intertwined. But perhaps we can start, see how far we get before people start to wig out, because we do have oral communications as well, and continue. Would there be an issue if we were to begin and take testimony from the public and then continue this if we needed to?
No, this is really for staff direction, And similar to what occurred a couple of years ago, we came back with a report after hearing from the council and the public and pared it down into some distinct issues that we were going to be culling through it. It took 3 reports, if you, for those who may recall, to get to the point where we actually had an ordinance for adoption. So it's really here for staff direction.
Okay,
and we can certainly do it in that fashion.
Because this is such a long report with so many different recommendations and so many different areas covered, and I don't know that we'll get through it tonight, I would like to invite our speaker to speak first because I have no idea where we're going to finish. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Allen? Okay. Then I'm going to call Barry Allen, and then we're going to launch into our conversation. And if we continue it, we will not be taking testimony from you again, but other members of the public would be able to speak.
Do you have, I'm sorry, do you have cards for all the communications as well?
Yes, they do.
Maybe we can hear them as well, so in case we go on to 10, 11 o'clock.
And just a correction, if the matter does come back for further discussion, if the matter doesn't substantially change, the council can limit the speakers. However, if the matter is going to be changed,
Okay.
You're going to be kind of moving through this, and it'll be expanded and contracted somewhat, the speaker will have an opportunity to speak again.
Well, if we were going to do oral communications first, we would have to close this item, right, and then move to oral
We
communications.
can just recess it, move to oral communicate, just hold it essentially and move to
Why don't
oral
we go
communications.
with this, see how far we get on it.
Well, you know what, it's 8 o'clock, it's not that late. I think we should take this item, some of our speakers
It
may...
seems like it is.
It seems like it's late.
It's been a long day.
But, it's given how we usually go, I think it's not that late. And so let's continue with this item, and I'll call Barry Allen, and then we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Mayor Friedman, council, staff, of course, the public. This is quite voluminous, as you already have spoken to, and there are several items, several issues that I just want to touch on. For instance, the legal fund. The only person here that I can recall that has had a need of a legal fund was Mr. Weaver, and he can possibly share with the council how much it cost him for the legal issues with the FPPC and how that drew out over a 6-year period. Now, other legal issues, I think, unless it's a criminal issue, that the city is going to defend and hold harmless any of its city council members who are acting on the behalf of the city. And certainly I've had some conversations with some of the city attorneys regarding that. If it's a criminal issue, I would wonder if any of the people that have made contributions to any particular candidate or public official for legal defense would want to pay for a criminal defense. I really wonder if that's how somebody would want their money spent. Then there's the list of the contractors and all the different consultants and contributors and everybody within the city. I don't think that the Political Reform Act was looking for the city to maintain lists and things like that they already should have, but the onus is on the candidate to check to make sure who they are getting those funds from. And when I look at some of the 460s, I see a lot of information missing. And I say, well, gee, yeah, I wonder if the candidate knew who gave money. Now, having run and been involved in various campaigns, I know that probably 95% of the money that comes in, the candidate knows where it came from. And I don't think that the issues of ADI and, for instance, in this document, you cite taxi cabs. Well, I know there were a lot of cab drivers who are independent businessmen who rent their facilities from the various cab companies. But when you look at the fact that I didn't see any waiters in there, and there were a lot of waiters several years ago from the banquet halls that were putting in money. Now, the issue of using your funds for various city events, I do believe that the city provides reimbursement when you attend functions that are required by the city. And I've seen those reimbursements from looking at Mr. Weaver's material. And I do think that you should take out of your campaign fund your meet and greet where you're going out to spread the name and making sure you can get reelected in the next election. Anyways, there's a lot more, and time is out. I'm Barry Allen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Howard?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, certainly some good points, and a lot of this are related to policy issues that the council needs to take up. So with that, let me start with the first item in order that we have it, and that is the whole notion of limiting voting on matters of which an official received a campaign contribution. And while there are a number of examples that may be out there, the one I focused on principally was Pasadena's Measure B. One, because it does kind of encompass the issue pretty broadly and fully, and two, it's been upheld at least on its procedure, not on the substance by the Court of Appeal. And in essence, the provisions of Measure B it includes certain provisions that provide that an elected official who's exercised discretion, whether it's for a public benefit or approval of a contract, again with some exceptions for low bid and a $25,000 threshold, cannot accept a campaign contribution from any of those individuals or the principals of those companies, if there are companies involved, directors which have a certain stake in the company and the like, for a period of up to 1 year after leaving office or 5 years after a vote, whichever comes first.
I'm sorry to have a question so soon. Maybe it doesn't bode well for how long this is going to take. I understand that in terms of contracts, but would that also include voting on entitlement issues?
The answer is yes, under Pasadena Measure B, and also...
No, I mean entitlement issues that don't have to do with a direct contracting with the city. So, for instance, let's say a design review board appeal came to us, and a homeowner was involved. Does that mean that we would have to, if that homeowner had given money, you would have to recuse yourself from?
It could. Okay. It could. Under Measure B, it applies to not only contracts but public benefit. Well, it doesn't mean you have to adopt yes Measure B in its entitlement.
And then also,
and it's in total.
That would mean that you couldn't vote on any, you couldn't accept money from them for 5 years as well.
5 years, yes. 5 years from the date of the vote.
So just to be clear, so we're not just talking about people that are contracting with the city or receiving city money, but really it could be any developer that would want to develop with it. A developer, any homeowner. Does it extend to things like someone who came in for put a historic house on the register?
It's going to depend on what you want it to apply to. This is Measure B from Pasadena. It includes what they call public benefits. Public benefits are, it's kind of defined in reverse. The way the charter amendment reads, and I believe it's 1703, they list 7 areas which they consider to be not public benefits, and so that everything else is swept in as a public benefit. For example, they have a financial threshold, $23,000. If you're going to lease property, as long as that property is not worth more than $23,000 or $25,000, it's not included. It's again, within legal bounds, it's as broad or as narrow as you want to make it. Currently, by way of illustration, our campaign finance regulations limit campaign contributions from individuals who have applications pending, either before the redevelopment agency or the city council. So if someone has an application pending, and we define that pretty thoroughly, and I've attached that as I believe it's Exhibit B to your report, those individuals, you cannot solicit, nor can individuals provide you with a campaign contribution for a period of up to 90 days after final vote.
But that doesn't include, and I'm just trying to understand, I'm not at all arguing, I'm just trying to understand the parameters, but that our current campaign ordinance wouldn't preclude someone from giving money if they had a design review board project pending, even if they didn't know if it was going to go to an appeal. It wouldn't preclude someone who was planning on trying to list their house on the historic register, I'm assuming.
The answer is yes. Relative to our campaign ordinance now, correct.
It would not.
It would not. It would not. It has to be where the appeal has been filed with the City Council, except for redevelopment, where once somebody files an application with the redevelopment agency, whether it's a letter or an application, because the matter comes directly to the redevelopment agency, that would trigger the time period for which a campaign contribution cannot be provided or solicited.
Okay.
With the other examples you gave, an appeal would have to be pending before the council.
Thank you.
So, going back to Measure B, one of the things I found, again, kind of gets into some of the other issues that we've noted, is that Measure B does provide for a noticing requirement, that you provide notice to contractors, others, subcontractors who may get contractors and others who might be doing business with the city of these regulations, so that at least on the front end, they're aware that there may be some limits in providing campaign contributions to those who may be voting on their projects. And I felt that was something that was important or should be important to consider by the council, given some of the issues that we've had with this lack of knowledge. Even though, while it's a correct legal maxim that the onus is on the candidate for office to understand where the campaign contributions are coming. Many times, from a practical perspective, that is not easy, particularly where you have a contractor. It may be very simple to point out that a contractor has applied to the city through a proposal, for example, to perform work, or they're listed. There may be dozens of trade subs that haven't been noticed yet, and you wouldn't know that. And so at some point in time, you may be getting campaign contributions, and then later on that pops up as an issue. And so this is one way of at least trying to staunch that particular problem through notice. Likewise, Measure H has a very similar requirement, recently adopted by the voters of Los Angeles in March of this year, has a similar requirement for notification. Their monetary thresholds are different, and they have some interesting language because of the unique structure of Los Angeles. But they are both, they both have as their goal the limitation of campaign contributions by contractors, subcontractors, in the case of Pasadena, those seeking public benefits. Again, broader than what we have now. And depending upon where you want to go, we can draft an ordinance which could keep the breadth of Pasadena's Measure B, for example, or we could actually limit it based upon where this council feels that it needs to go and does not need to go. I shall tell you, I have not had a conversation, for example, with the city attorney of Pasadena to find out, as a practical matter, how this has worked. Enforcement of their ordinance falls within the city attorney's office unless there's an allegation that a city council member has violated it, in which case it's turned over to the district attorney's office. But I have not had a conversation with her to find out exactly, and I certainly, perhaps it's something I should have done and something I certainly can do. But that, in a very summary nutshell, maybe it sounds like it's more than summary, is what Measure B was intended to do for Pasadena. Limit those campaign contributions after a vote has been taken on a matter involving either a request for a public benefit or a contract. With no further questions, Measure A is sort of a more recent, I'll say, big sister of Measure B, recently adopted in the city of Los Angeles. Measure H in Los Angeles.
I was looking for A. I didn't find it.
For good reason. Measure H applies to contractors, and where there's a difference with Measure B, it doesn't reflect anything about public benefits. It strictly applies to contractors, subcontractors who are anticipated to receive a major part of a contracting job, and underwriters. Los Angeles, again, not only given their structure, but given probably the amount of bonds that they must issue, probably retain a number of underwriters for issuing bonds, whether it's for the city or any one of their various agencies. Likewise, LA's structure is somewhat different than ours, and so while there is some applicability, there is also some significant differences. LA, for example, has a number of elected positions that we do not have. They have city attorney, they have a city controller, they also have city council members, and they have an elected mayor. And as you go through their charter amendment, Measure H, they divide the limits based on, the limits are the same, but they divide them between those different types of elected officers, because the city council, for example, approves a number of types of contracts. And so you can't give campaign contributions to city council members or candidates for city council because they may approve certain contracts. And yet there are certain contracts that are approved directly by the city controller or by other officers of the city of Los Angeles, which Glendale doesn't have. And as a result, they had to, in Measure H, the drafters of that included within its ambit prohibitions on campaign contributions to those elected officers or candidates for those elected offices. So sometimes if you read it and you read it quickly, you look at and the language and it almost seems duplicative, but there's actually some subtle differences between them. They also have a much higher monetary threshold. Ours, for example, is $25,000. Pasadena's Measure B is $25,000. LA is $100,000. What appears to be common in most of these, and not just Measure H or Measure B, are some of the exclusions. And the one most notable is what we'll call the low bid contract, where you really have no discretion to award a contract to the lowest responsible bidder under our charter, in which case the evil sought to be prevented, the possible influence caused by campaign contributions, is not apparent. And so for the most part, those are generally excluded. So you don't have to worry about the myriad of low bid contracts that you're going to be approving either on a consent calendar or otherwise. It's generally for contracts for professional types of services, public type benefits, whether it's a land use entitlement or otherwise, or projects involving public agency land or public agency subsidies, whether that's in terms of money, donation of land, or other benefits provided by the public agency. Again, certainly happy to answer any questions about measures B and H. I mentioned underwriters with measure H. Certainly, if the council were inclined to do that, we could include a limit on underwriters. A question actually did come into our office about a campaign contribution involving this local election, not involving the council election, but one of our sister agencies. A question, of course, was not regulated by us, but it was a question involving a campaign contribution from a law firm affiliated with an underwriting firm, and whether or not that created any issues. So there's.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you mid-sentence. I was waiting for a pause, a breath. It was
I don't pause.
Long time.
I don't even breathe.
I have a question about Measure H. The line that says, the bullet point that says, that prohibits the aforementioned categories of persons from engaging in prohibited fundraising. Can you explain what that is getting at and how you would prevent it?
The latter part I may not be able to address. The former, though, it's intended to deal with not only the contractor providing the contribution, and we'll use the contractor as the example, but the contractor or its principals, directors, etc., from actually going out and fundraising to collect money to provide. The enforcement of that I look to be a little bit somewhat problematic.
How do you constitutionally say that? And by the way, I'm for this, so I'm asking this as for a practical reason of how we actually would make this work. So you have a contractor who's forbidden from giving money, and that contractor maybe is going to get around that by going out and telling his friends to give money. How do you then tell those people that despite what their friend says, hey, do me a favor and give contributions, how do we tell those people they're not allowed if they don't have a direct connection?
I think what you're looking at is what I've referred to, and I think the FPPC refers to as somewhat as the made at the behest of situation. It does create, and anything with campaign contribution limits or attempted expenditure limits all have a collision with the First Amendment. And it does potentially create some issues. This is a very new provision that Los Angeles voters just adopted. Hasn't been tested. I think, though, if you go back to the original case, Buckley versus Vallejo, what the courts have said with campaign contributions is that as long as you're able to demonstrate, and it doesn't take a lot, what the evils are that you're trying to prevent, that you're going to be, and draw some nexus to that, you're going to be able to support a limit on campaign contributions and those who can contribute. I've seen much more stringent campaign contributions, a zero campaign contribution limit by some organizations, by contractors and the like. I've also seen very stringent gift limits. MTA, for example, has, I believe, a $10 limit for gifts for individuals who have contracts or proposals pending before the MTA. I think all are constitutional. This is going to, if somebody challenges this, it'll be an interesting argument because I think where you're going to be trying to focus on is really the independence of the giver. Did they make that decision to give independently, or was somebody actually out there fundraising as a contractor as a way of just trying to walk around the limitation on their ability to provide a campaign contribution?
Is it possible, in order to put some teeth in this, to have a mandatory sort of contract that we put on campaign donation forms that says something like, I, the donor, am not doing this on the behest of any person forbidden from giving campaign funds, and putting that burden on them? Because as someone who's been a candidate, you also a lot of times don't know if someone's giving you money because someone has asked them to, or sometimes how that's all come about. And I would feel better if that person actually had to put in writing that they're allowed to give you money.
There's probably another way to do that, and the only reason I suggest another way is it may become a bit. First of all, there's no campaign donation form other than your 460 that you report now, at least here in this city. So somebody can go out and fundraise and bring in 3 or 4 checks. The 10th issue that we have is an issue that's currently before the FPPC for discussion. It hasn't even reached the hearing stage yet, and that's the bundling issue that they're looking at, which is where someone, and we'll use a $250 limit, someone will go out and get 5 checks for $250. Currently, as the law stands right now, they can just come to a campaign committee and give those 5 checks, $250 each, to the campaign committee, and each one of those would have to be recorded as a donation to the campaign. The person who actually solicited those funds and brought them would not have to report that. Under what current proposal, and again, it's really at the nascent stage, the FPPC, is the requirement that someone who actually collects that money is required to report their name, their occupation, essentially a few other pieces of information, so that it's more transparent and the public knows it's not only the individuals who provided the funds, but also the individual that went out and fundraised and collected the funds. And that's maybe where you might want to focus, because that can, I think, give you some assurances. I'm not sure that we want to go to the point of creating some kind of a donation form where it becomes a paperwork nightmare. Right now, we don't have, for example, in our campaign ordinance, we don't require local reporting. We don't require anything other than compliance with state law when it comes to the reporting requirements, the 460 forms, the timing. All we do is have campaign finance limitations, both in terms of money, in terms of how long you can collect, payment of debt, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't require any of the paperwork reporting locally. That is something that may, certainly want to talk to the city clerk about whether that would become somewhat burdensome during the election season if we actually started campaign reporting here, whether it's through a form or otherwise.
Okay. If you take money from someone, you shouldn't be able to vote on their project, on their issue, or on their entitlement. And if you vote on their project, issue, or entitlement, you shouldn't be able to take money from them for a year prior to a year after. That's my concept at this point. I think this whole 5 years is, especially like a year after you're out of office. Who's going to give you money if you're out of office for a year, presumably for...
Or the day after.
or the day after.
Year before the vote and the year after the vote is that what we're talking about?
Right. If you get money now, there should be at least a 1-year blackout period.
Right. Before and after.
Before you can vote. But if the vote comes first, then you should have a 1-year period with which you cannot accept any donations. Now, some of our, that sort of overlaps with some of our campaign contribution periods existing. We might tinker with those later, but I think that should be a starting point for this sort of thing. That's what really, I think, betrays the public's trust, is they go back and they say, oh, look, a month before the vote, you got this donation, whether it was big or small, from XYZ, and then you voted on XYZ. Or the other way around. You voted on XYZ, and then soon after that, in the midst of your campaign, you got a nice check. And I think that's what I'd like to focus on this particular issue as a starting point. If you want to tinker with it, at that point. And when you say vote on their issue, I think we need to have some sort of threshold. There could be very minor things that should be permissible, but I think the $25,000 is a decent value at this point.
If I can weigh in, and then this is the kind of discussion I think we really need to have, because we can kind of begin to hone in. This is essentially a narrower version of Measure B in part, and it does meld well with our current campaign finance regulations. And from a draftsperson perspective, both as a draftsperson and someone who's going to be looking at the constitutional or legal issues, it can work. We can put those together, so it can work.
So if we do it for $25,000, how does that figure in then for the person who's coming in with a DRB appeal, or we have to say yes to all historic resource listings? How do you value that? How do you put a monetary value?
I wouldn't. At this point, unless I get direction from the council, I would leave the current language we have. This would be an expansion of what we have. The current language when it comes to applications pending right now is if there's appeal pending before the city council, you cannot get a campaign contribution or solicit one from the individual company, et cetera, that has that application pending for a period of up to 90 days after the vote.
So you're not
I would extend that 90 days to a year, for example, but I'm not suggesting changing that unless the direction from the council is to, well, let's narrow it down to just contractors. I don't think I'm hearing that from Councilmember Najarian. I think it's anyone that has something that's going to be coming before the elected officials that may have either a boat.
Could be a variance.
Yeah, could be a variance.
Entitlement.
CUP.
It could be parking, exemption. These are all.
So it's not
it really
just the
depends on.
$25,000.
One of the changes that you could consider is, as I indicated, right now under our ordinance, that period begins to run when an appeal is actually contemplated to get before the city council, meaning that somebody actually filed an appeal from a CUP, from the Planning Commission, as opposed to the redevelopment agency, because anything that goes to the agency or even the housing authority it just jumps directly to you as a body, whether you're sitting here as a member of the agency or housing authority. And so in those, that application is pending the moment we get a letter.
But on the others, it's limited to when an appeal is actually filed. So we can broaden that to make it. You're kind of doing that now if we apply the 1 year to 1 year before the vote and after the vote. But there's a whole host of combinations and permutations we can do with this. We can leave the application pending definition the way it is, that an appeal has to be filed, so that you're not burdened if somebody goes to HPC and actually files something and they still want to give you a campaign contribution, they can, but as soon as they file that appeal, that 1 year time period starts to run.
Well, HPC, they're not appeals, they all come to us.
That's a recommendation. You're correct. Let's go to Planning Commission with the variance.
Madam Mayor, I'm not feeling good. Would you mind if I be excused? I want to be here tomorrow for sure at 9, so I think I better get some rest.
I hope it wasn't me.
I think it might have been my lunch. I won't say where I was.
Don't tell, so we don't go there next time.
I'm just hoping it wasn't me.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. So what I'm hearing, and again, Councilmember Najarian, I think laid it out well, is that there's no contribution or vote 1 year before to 1 year after. It means 1 year before a vote to 1 year after a vote. If there's a campaign contribution up to 1 year before, you're not voting. If you get a campaign contribution 1 year before, you're not voting on it. If it comes in after the vote, you can't accept it for a period of a year.
That's my feeling. I'm very comfortable with that.
And with a $25,000 threshold, so the minor things that really, again, the overarching principle is to remedy the evil that's out there, again, real or I'll say strongly perceived, and that is the influence of individuals that may have on the campaign contributions may have. The thought is that a $25,000 threshold, things are so minor, no one's going to be interested in providing a significant amount of campaign contribution money for a project that's worth $10,000.
You'd be surprised.
I may be.
My only hesitation is that I wonder whether, rather than a year, it should be campaign cycle to campaign cycle, because we already can't take money between cycles. So since we can only take money when we're within that, 6-month period leading up to a campaign, and 2 weeks after?
Well, it's September through the date of the campaign, and then you have a period which we extended to November 1st for the continuing contributions for payment of debt or for excess funds, which kind of gets into the office holder account.
But really, my biggest concern is the ease by which people can circumvent this by either soliciting funds or by doing pass-throughs of other people, which is illegal, but we can't enforce that, realistically.
What is the current, and I'm not aware of it, what is the current ordinance in terms of after the election fundraiser?
So 2 weeks?
How long is it? 2 weeks?
The campaign fundraising for purposes of raising funds for the election ends the day after the election. You can continue raising funds to pay down debt or to increase up to $10,000 on what we're calling an excess fund account, and you can do that up to November 1st of that same year.
On November 1st of this year?
Yes. Again, to pay off debt. And again, it kind of it pulls us into one of the other issues, a couple of the other issues we have, whether it's the defense fund issue, the defense fund issue, the office holder accounts issue, and likewise a couple of the other issues involving, do you want to extend that date? Do you want to eliminate it entirely?
And that may change my feeling about the year, depending on what we do with that, so I'll put that on hold.
You pointed out earlier, Madam Mayor, there's a lot of intertwining between some of these. And maybe I should have done a better job in really trying to pull them apart. But there's some interconnection between some of these. But there were issues we wanted to discuss.
All in all, I agree with Mr. Quintero and Mr. Najarian that we should aim for a revision that encompasses what these two ordinances from Pasadena and Los Angeles.
Okay. The next issue that I have and again, any time you want to break in and say, let's go back to that, please don't hesitate to do that. Yeah.
Have we been shy?
No, but I want to make sure, don't feel uncomfortable doing that at all. The next issue I have, at least in the order in the report, is the office holder accounts issue. And I know there's been some question about the whole issue of creation of office holder accounts. I actually did a quick survey of of office holder accounts, and I'm going to separate office holder accounts from defense funds. for my survey here. There are a whole host of cities that have authorize what they call office holder accounts. Really, it's almost another way of just saying excess funds. Surplus funds are those funds that are left over after an unsuccessful campaign. Excess funds are those funds that are left over after a successful campaign that you maintain in a campaign fund. Many cities, Los Angeles and some others, characterize those as office holder accounts. Even the state have regulations under Title II of the California Code of Regulations for office holder accounts. Right now, for excess funds, we have a limit of $10,000. As I note in the report, the use of those funds is wide and varied under state law. And if we followed state law, essentially somewhat engrafting those provisions into our local code, you would be able to use those funds for a whole wide variety of things, from anything that's political, legislative, or governmental in nature that assists you in your duties as an office holder. So it's, as I indicated in the report, it's so varied that it would take up pages and pages to give you illustrations, but suffice it to state, I cited an FPPC advice letter, the Bauer advice letter, that as long as the predominant purpose is reasonably related to the duties of the office, the expenditure from campaign funds could be lawful. And there was some discussion, or there was some notion that perhaps we ought to discuss raising that $10,000 limit. You can do that in multiple ways, not only just raise the limit, but you could also extend the time within which you can raise funds. There is nothing in the law that would restrict you from pulling that November 1st cap that we have for payment of debt or excess funds, just eliminating it entirely and allowing continuing fundraising or contributions solely to replenish an office holder account. It's done at the state level and it's done at other city levels. The only limitation I would suggest if you do that is that you cannot use those funds for anything other than the purposes of, as I've noted in the Bauer advice letter, for example, you can't use it to carry over to fund your next election campaign or to contribute to a measure that's on the ballot or contribute it to another candidate's campaign.
I think that was our thought when we limited the campaign holders' accounts, is that on previous elections, incumbents would roll in with $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 and just have such a superior advantage over challengers that it would be really not that fair. So that's why the 10,000 figure came. Now, that being said, I think I'm down to under 1,000. I mean, I'm very low, and there are many events that I'm just not able to purchase tickets to, and I'm not bold and brassy enough to say, hey, I want to come for free, give me the comp ticket, and I end up not going. And their feelings are hurt, my feelings are hurt. Sometimes the city's representation there is not what it should be. So that's that's sort of the balance that we had. Now, if we restricted those funds truly as office holder funds and restricted the use of those funds only for attending civic events or paying cost, well, we were talking about parking the other day. Go to an event at the JW Marriott, and there are many governmental agencies that have events there.
Education.
That's $30 a pop just to get in the parking garage, and I oftentimes find myself second guessing whether I really need to go to that event due to the high cost. I mean, I figure I've got 2 more years, and if there's a few events that I want to attend, I want to have at least something to be able to spend. Now, the issue about having it evergreen or having it being replenished, you might as well say that there's no limit at all. I mean, if you get up to 10,000, spend it down and say, well, I can replenish it, there's nothing there. But I think the whole point behind this 10,000 was to make sure that it wasn't used in a campaign unfairly, giving an unfair advantage. So if we're going to define office holder accounts as funds that can be used for, and I'm sure someone else has a better definition than me, but attending civic events, parking expenses in relation to those events, educational expenses in relation to pursuing our job. I mean, there's, the Harvard School of Government has a great program for elected officials. I look at the tuition and I'm like, well, there's no way I'm going to, not saying that they would even accept me. I would like to say I went to Harvard, though.
I think they would.
those type of things. There are seminars that are outside the city that I really would like to go to, but I don't want to go to the city, in these tight budget times. I don't want the city to have to pay for that. I don't want it to appear as though I'm living high on the hog off the city when I go to San Francisco for the housing summit or, whatever the particular event or seminar or convention might be. So I wouldn't have a problem, I guess two things. Opening up the time period in which funds could be raised for that office holder account exclusively. Strictly defining the office holder account for those types of uses. And not being able to roll anything into the next campaign, or not being able to roll significant portions into the next campaign, because currently, and if I kept $10,000 in the account and the election is coming up, I could just roll that into. I currently could not do that.
No, because Madam Mayor, Councilmember Najarian, as you properly pointed out, the whole dialogue that we had about the excess funds and
was for that purpose.
It was for that purpose, and we issued an opinion based upon some of the cases that prior to the date that we enacted the ordinance, we couldn't stop a rollover at that point. But from the date of the adoption of the ordinance, any monies that were raised after that date, we could.
So I think we should consider doing that, permitting fundraising up to the $10,000 amount throughout the term, but strictly restricting the use of those funds for attending civic events, educational seminars, etc., travel to those seminars, costs incurred in those seminars. You have to pay for a hotel room, presumably, if you're going to spend more than a day.
We can either define something like that on our own, or we can use the myriad of FPPC opinions. For example, a number of the examples you gave are they're actually the subject of FPPC opinions that found that it was a proper expenditure of excess or office holder account funds to be, for example, the Harvard School.
Now, let me add one more thing to that, and maybe it's something that would be dealt in this fund, this account, or something differently. When this whole ADI scandal broke, and it was, reported that, properly reported that I had obtained campaign contributions from subcontractors, as well as other cities. City of Los Angeles, for example. I think Eric Garcetti had obtained some. He says, oh, no problem. I'll just return those funds. I've got my account. I'm going to return those funds right away. And he wrote a check. And I said, gee, I would certainly love to do that. I'd love to have funds available to return to the particular donor, those donors who may have felt pressured into giving them, or, that whole issue that arose. So how would you describe the use of the fund for those types of reimbursements? What do you call it?
Short answer, yes. And again, it really kind of depends on how far you want to go with that, but it would be essentially reimbursement for a campaign contribution that would determine to have been tainted in some fashion. That's a broad way of stating, but I can narrow it down with some specific language. But I see where you're going, and the answer is yes, we could do that.
And Glendale was silent. I would have loved to tell the news press, oh, well, by the way, here's my check. I'm returning it to those guys. I didn't have an account to return it from. So we should think about that maybe.
What is the purpose of not being able to roll any leftover funds into the next campaign?
So you don't have an advantage, the incumbents don't have an advantage.
Yeah, but it's $10,000. How much of an advantage is that? If you have a couple of $1,000s left in the account, you have to put it aside and start a new account?
Yeah.
Or what about allowing it to be rolled over into another office holder's account so that, is it possible to do it that way?
What do you mean another office
Well,
holder?
for your next term. So, because right now what it says is you actually have to spend all that money.
Oh, it should roll over. I would agree that it should roll over.
If you're going to look at a continuous replenishment within a cap, say current cap of $10,000, it sounds like what you're talking about is continuous rollover. Whether it's considered evergreen or not, it's going to be an office holder account that, as you begin to go below, if you have a $10,000 cap, you drop to a level that you don't feel comfortable with, you can fundraise to bring money up to that cap once again. It's a policy decision of whether you want to change the existing ordinance to allow a rollover of all or a portion of those funds into a subsequent campaign.
I don't see any issues with that. I mean, $10,000 doesn't really give you, maybe you can do half a mailer with $10,000. It's not a big issue. It's not that big of an advantage, but, we'll see how the rest of the council members feel.
I would think about that. I hadn't thought about been back and forth. I thought you could roll it into. Now Scott said you could.
Yeah, we
originally said nothing at all.
Right.
Originally we said you couldn't roll anything.
We could when we enacted the ordinance because of the funds that were already existent. We could not, based upon my read of the cases, we could not take those funds and stop zero.
Everyone's at zero.
But let's not forget that non-incumbents don't have to. They can start fundraising a year before if they want to. I mean, I was raising money when I ran, and I was one of the first people to go under the new campaign ordinance. I mean, the people that were running against me didn't have to because, like you said, you didn't make it retroactive.
Couldn't.
But I had to, and as a non-incumbent, I was able to raise money as soon as I announced that I was running for office and pulled papers. I don't really have a strong opinion either way about rolling into the next campaign, but I do feel that if there's a specific office holder's account, at least that should be able to roll over. And we might be able to do the same thing, and I'm open to restricting that to not be used for campaigning. But I just wanted to briefly, echo what Mr. Najarian said. When I ran, I didn't really, I think a lot of people don't realize that not only how many events you're invited to, which is like a gazillion, it's like there's events almost every single day of the week in Glendale, which is pretty incredible. It's nice. It means there's a lot of nonprofits, basically. And almost none of them will comp you. Maybe as mayor, I don't know yet, I've only been mayor for a week. But as a council member, you don't generally get comp because they're nonprofits and they're paying for that lunch or whatever it is, so they expect you to pay, which is perfectly reasonable. But the city does not pay for those. They pay for a very few. What is it, like 2 or 3 events a year? I think there's like a few events that are city-sponsored events, like the State of the City Luncheon, and I know there's a few things, but all of the other ones, they're not. So you have to pay yourself, and like he said, you don't want to say no because it's really important to these groups to have city representation, and yet you could literally go broke trying to pay for all of these. And an office holder account is a way for the city not to have to pay, taxpayers don't have to pay, and you can use money that people have donated to you for this purpose to be able to attend those events. And I had meant today to bring in, what is it, your 460 where you report all of or your Form 700?
Well, the Form 700 is your annual conflict of interest form. Your 460 is your campaign.
The 460, I was going to bring in my 460, but we had no break between our meetings today because I wanted to just read where the money went. And it's all things like Boy Scouts of America lunch, Path Achieve lunch, Seroptimus lunch. There's lots of events in the evening that are, $20 to get into Clancy's for the business Chamber of Commerce mixer. There's lots of things like that. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to be able to raise money to pay for those events that the community expects us to go to, wants us to go to, but they don't want to pay for us, and a lot of us don't have the resources to pay for ourselves.
And Madam Mayor, just to make sure that it's clear, when you talk about comp tickets, depending on who gives them to you, what your role might be, just made the front page of the newspaper a few days ago, those could create conflict of interest issues for you as well, as we saw with mayor to the large city surrounding us, as well as a number of council members. So we have to be always vigilant about that. Office holder account issues would still require some reporting because they're expenditures that you're making through a campaign account, but it wouldn't create the conflict of interest issue where somebody's actually providing you with a comp ticket and you may or may not be performing a ceremonial role, etc.
Just a suggestion that just occurred to me, and that's the office holder account, the fundraisings for the office holder account. Maybe we can limit it to $99 instead of having $1,000 limit. We can have it at $99, so it's not a big conflict.
About that.
So if you're going to do fundraising after the elections, it shouldn't be more than $99 per person or organization. Right now it's $1,000, right?
It's $1,000, yes, sir.
So during campaigns, that's fine, but after the campaign,
I would be
just a suggestion.
Yeah.
I need to think about it. I'd rather have it's less begging, Rafi. You know how it is. You got asking money.
I know, but after the campaign, I just think limiting, you don't want to get $1,000 checks. I don't want to get $1,000 checks. I prefer $99 personally. So.
Not reportable?
No, it's just not big enough where I have to fill in all the individuals there, But people still give me $100 checks, even when I tell them give me $99.
I think that that what's important is not so much the amount of money that's given, it's who's giving the money. And if we can take out the equation of people who are coming to the city for approvals, whether it's entitlements or contracting, that's where I think the concern comes. I think the concern is less the actual dollar amount, because even in cities that have a limit of $250, you still have the same charges of special interests and people giving money. And what I would like to see is the strongest ordinance we can get that prohibits people that are routinely or at all coming in and asking the council for anything from giving money, whatever amount that is, whether it's $99 or $1,000. We need to take that money out of the equation to where it could ever even be perceived as figuring into the making of a fair decision. And that's what I'm more concerned about. If someone gives $1,000 who doesn't ever come in front of us, really, who cares? My father gave me $1,000 when I ran for office, and if he was going to give me $1,000 for my campaign fund, who cares? He's never going to come in front of us asking for anything because he lives in South Florida. But if it's $100 from someone who's going to come in front of us, that's more concerning to me. So that's where I would like to see us put our focus, is who's giving money, and how do we take out, how do we make sure that people that are lobbying, coming in front of the council, don't find ways of channeling money to candidates. That's what I'm more nervous about, and how we prevent that. And I'm still not convinced that we can really stop that. And I would like to try to find as many ways as we can to do that.
I hardly think that giving $99 is buying influence with anything.
I agree, but I guess you'd be amazed what people would accuse. Okay, so I think you're getting some pretty clear direction so far.
I am, and I'm very thankful.
I'd be amenable to $50 if you guys are okay. Or $49.
$99.
On the other hand, and again, that's a policy decision of where you want to set that limit for office holder accounts. But an area maybe for another day to think about is having our own gift limits. Right now, for example, we just follow state law. $50 gift limits for reporting, $420, which is going to be going up this year for disqualification. As I noted, the MTA, Rules of Conduct for Contractors, the Public Utilities Code, strictly limits gifts by proposers and contractors. $10, I think $25 is another limit for certain other times. Very limited. So if there's some issue there as well, we could certainly come back with something of that nature. I did not include that in the report.
Has there been a problem with gifts?
Well, I'm probably the worst person to say, because I kind of sit in my office. Well, I don't know, I guess, is my answer, because I think it's partially reality and partially public perception. But you do notice a number of agencies, cities and otherwise, and districts limit gifts more strictly than state law does.
Right now, the limit is $50.
State law, it's limited. The $50 limit is for disclosures. It's anything 50 or above. $420 is the disqualifying limit within a 12-month rolling period.
And a gift is worse than a campaign contribution in many respects.
Yeah.
Well, I think that having that limit for disclosure is very important, and we do have that, so that the whole world will see if you receive a gift.
Right.
And I mean,
I'm not ready to chew on that one. My brain is starting to.
Yes.
It's only 8:30.
Well, we can tackle one of the offshoots of the office holder accounts, and that's defense funds. And the reason I say it's an offshoot, because there's a similar connection. It's the raising of it's raising of funds for defense of actions that occur. And I think Mr. Allen's comment was correct. For many types of civil cases, for example, that may be brought against you in the course and scope of your official duties, the city is obligated under the government code to provide you with the defense. But that's not every case. And you've probably read in the papers fairly regularly that whether it's a state officer or a local officer or someone else is out raising funds for a defense fund because they've been charged with something that occurred in the context of the performance of their duties, or out on the campaign trail, or whether it's FPPC related issues or a recount, for example. Those types of funds are considered to be appropriate for a defense fund. You can limit that by allowing, again, whether it's by a time frame, limit that defense fund fundraising can't start unless you hit a certain threshold, that charges have either been filed or you received a letter putting you on notice of a possible charge by the FPPC. You've received a notice by some other organization or lawyer threatening to sue you or candidate.
You couldn't use an office holder account for that sort of stuff under this proposal?
There's actually considered separate funds under state law. Because we're a charter city, we could perhaps combine them into that, but I'm not sure you're going to want to do that because my recommendation would be if we would actually do anything like that, you'd separate out the reporting.
And paying for a recount couldn't come out of a campaign fund?
It can. It can also come out of a defense fund because it arose out of a campaign. I actually found an FPPC opinion on it. But it can.
Thoughts?
Well, the thought is, first off, we're discussing this not because any of us feel that we're going to be needing a defense fund. However, it would certainly be unfair to any one of us in light of the, people come and brag about the reports that they make to the investigative agencies, et cetera. And in fact, we tell them, if you think there's something wrong, go tell the district attorney or the FPPC. But should an investigation be commenced, and should you not have the funds available, you are just, forget it. And attorneys are expensive, and $10,000 will go like that. That might not even be enough to get in the door and get a retainer to many of these more prominent attorneys. So I think we do need to have the availability just out of fairness, because the assets and the power of the government is going to be, basically it's brought against you when you're charged with a criminal offense or an administrative violation. And our system is based on the premise that you're able to retain an attorney and defend yourself appropriately. So I think we should have a legal defense fund provision, but it should be triggered on the occurrence of a notice of an investigation or whatever the preliminary, something before indictment or before
before charges
give
are
you
filed.
The silver bracelets and all that other stuff.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Jerry, I think your point's well taken. Clearly, in the society that we have today, the mere filing of a complaint alone, if that triggers any kind of information that flows through to an elected official that you may be under investigation, that may be the time to hire the lawyer now, to be able to intervene and begin to discuss what's going on, what's happening, even if it's out to just have some conversations with investigators, prosecutors, and the like. I would suggest an earlier period of time where there's some crystallization, that there is some accusation against you, rather than, like you point out, waiting for charges to be filed or an indictment to come down. Because at that point in time, it's easy to run out and hire a lawyer. You may need a public defender, depending upon the circumstances. But to get in early to get the right firm, and I'll have to tell you some of these election-related issues, there are a handful of firms that handle these that are really top-notch, and you are correct. A $10,000 amount may not even get you in the door with a retainer.
And even something much more mundane, such as an FPPC reporting issue. They call you up, and there you are speaking directly to the investigator. And I tell my clients, never speak to the agency directly. Always have an attorney with you or doing the speaking for you. Now, in that sort of situation, if you don't have the funds to at least have an attorney speaking for you and representing you, which you're entitled to, you're at a severe disadvantage. God forbid you say the wrong thing or you mischaracterize what happened. You're busted. That's an admission that you've made, and you are in deep water. You should not feel inhibited and restricted because of lack of funds to contact an attorney and have an attorney represent you and at least speak for you in front of the FPPC or whatever other very low-level agency sometimes gets involved in some of these issues. Let's say it's the IRS, right? I mean, if there's an issue, was this really a campaign donation or was this income to you, et cetera, you may get a call from the IRS. And you may want to have an accountant. Are we limiting legal defense to licensed attorneys only, or other professionals as well in this sort of situation?
It's actually attorney's fees or other related legal costs. So if you can tie in an accountant or somebody else you need to be able to prepare a defense, I think that would be a legitimate
so
cost.
I think we need
with the language
to
of
do
statute
that
right now as it is for state.
It'll be fair for this council. It'll be fair for every other council that comes up here and says to be able to have the appropriate representation, legal, administrative, accounting, et cetera, to defend yourself.
My recommendation is Madam Mayor, members of the council, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel here. We can take what they have in state law and basically put it into our code. Because right now it doesn't apply to us because it applies to state officers, but that language already exists in state law.
I'd like to see that. Is that here already?
It's actually, I don't have it attached as an exhibit, but I do cite the section on page.
If you could bring that back to us when we see this.
Sure, I can bring the section 85304 of the government code.
I'd like to just take a step back to the office holder account and the limit, because the way that it worked when I ran afterwards, I'm trying to remember. I don't think I had a fundraiser after I was elected. I think that the ordinance, somehow I thought I couldn't raise money at that point. So I may have not had a fundraiser, but it seems like a million years ago. It was only 2 years. I think council member years are like dog years or something. But it would make sense to me that if you run for office and you win, that's the time when you'd want to have a fundraiser. And probably never again. I mean, I can't raise money now, but it would never occur to me now to go out and try to raise money. So I just wonder whether that $10,000 limit is something we want to look at, because rather than, oh no, someone just gave me to raise it, because otherwise you're going to be constantly having to go back out and fundraise, as opposed to doing it once, getting what you think you need, and just not having to do it again for 4 years.
As long as we're specifically earmarking that for those types of expenditures, I don't think there's, it prejudices or it gives you something that's unfair vis-a-vis a candidate in the next cycle.
And I'm not against a limit, but I didn't raise $10,000, so to me it's all very hypothetical. I don't think I would be able to raise even $10,000 after an election. But just looking at what I've spent on being in office, which includes visiting Sister City, which I had to pay for a portion of that, that can run into the thousands.
And that would be a legitimate expenditure.
And so to really be able to do, let's say in 4 years you want to visit 2 or 3 sister cities. You want to go to Korea, you want to go to Armenia, that could be, $5,000 right there.
You can go to Rosarito instead.
I would love to go to Rosarito. I'm a little nervous about going to Rosarito.
I'm not going because they'll stop me on the border when I tell them I was born in Lebanon.
Mr. Manuki and I love to tell the story. We had a bad experience crossing the border. Big smile on our faces.
Crossing back into the United States.
Crossing into the U.S. Smile on our faces, surfboard in the back. Where are you born? Tampa, Florida. Where are you born? Lebanon. The look on that person's face. I'll never, that border agent or border patrol, whoever it was, I'll never forget that. That look just that smile came to a screeching halt. And before we knew it, we were being pulled over into the secondary. Anyway.
Is that when you said you never saw this man before?
I should have said I was hitchhiking. It's his van.
So anyway, you see where I'm going with this.
I wouldn't be against that.
But I do think.
What would you say, 15,000?
I don't know. I'm open, but I do think that we need to prohibit that from being used for the next campaign cycle. I think that
agree.
needs to be very
I think
strict.
we're all.
I've heard no objection to that, and actually that was not so much a recommendation, but that was an observation in the report, that you want to limit it to those costs or charges that were reasonably related to the holding of office, not to be rolled over into a future campaign. Defense fund provisions, I heard. I'm just looking
State law.
show us what state law is.
Okay. I think.
I don't know. I don't remember him leaving.
I don't remember Jim leaving either.
Who's in the bathroom? Okay.
Okay, we'll accept it for now.
In the green room.
Okay. Are we going to move on to lobbyists?
Well, I was actually holding that off perhaps to another day because I think the suggestion, Madam Mayor, was to hold that off.
I just asked this because it is connected with the first point that we talked about with the campaign limits. Whether or not we register a lobbyist, I think that people that do come and speak to us about projects on behalf of other people, they need to fall under that same prohibition.
There is a constitutional limitation based on the cases of what you cannot prohibit outright a lobbyist from providing a campaign contribution. You can have them fall within the same limits. The courts have noted that with regard to lobbyists, it's acceptable to limit gifts and severely restrict that and to limit contributions, but you can't prohibit them from exercising that right to do that. It's just kind of one of the couple of cases that have come down that just note that. We can take another look at that, but I think, as I noted in the report, should have had.
But wouldn't they fall? Couldn't we put the same restriction on them in terms of projects that are coming before or after a year that we put on those other interested parties?
It apparently the lobbyists have been. I shouldn't say the lobbyists.
They've lobbied
but
for
those the cases that have come down dealing with lobbyists.
Can you limit their work?
You can't.
If they're earning a living doing lobbying, can you say, well, you can only lobby on one project in 2 years?
No. What you can do, and what 99% of the cities do, and other public agencies, and again, I have a survey that we did, you can require a lot of disclosures. Registration, regulation, fees, constant disclosures, constant re-upping, whether it's quarterly or monthly. You can't limit their contacts, as you pointed out, but you can require
I was asking
a lot
about
of
limiting
disclosure.
their contributions, not their contacts.
You can limit the contributions. My recommendation is based on the cases. You limit it to what you have now, $1,000. We might be able to lower that, but the cases...
They're limited to that now anyways.
Right, and that's what I'm noting. We might be able to pull that number down, but you can't ban them.
Right.
Okay, so we'll take up the lobbyist issue another day.
Yeah.
I do have a member of the public who turned a card in late, Harry Zabos.
Council, my name is Harry Zavos. I am a resident of Glendale, and as I heard the discussion, if I heard it correctly, anybody who made a contribution a year before they were going to be here before the council would require the councilman who received or council person who received that contribution to recuse himself. I'm all for campaign finance reform. I think anything you can do to minimize the influence of money or even the appearance of the influence of money on public decisions is praiseworthy. I do think, though, however, to cause a councilman to recuse themselves for a contribution that they received prior to the application, a year prior to the application, creates certain problems. If there are people that I wanted to get rid of on the council because I thought they would be a voice that would be antagonistic to my project, I could just recuse them by contributing. And if I felt something was coming up, I could also, that it might be appealed to the council, I could deadlock the council. I would simply contribute to 3 councilmen, and guess what? They wouldn't have a quorum, they couldn't sit, and they couldn't deliberate on that particular subject. So I would ask you to consider that possibility. Now, I think there's an alternative. If you want to proceed in this manner, fine. I just think that you ought to anticipate these kinds of problems that would arise if a number of councilmen had contributions. And somebody might innocently, for example, want to appear on give contributions with no anticipation of appearing before the council. And if, in fact, enough councilmen were recused that they would be denied any appeal to this council. A lot of people have said one of the best disinfectants is sunshine, so you might consider it as an alternative rather than recusing the councilman, that at the meeting where that item is to be deliberated on, that there be a public disclosure of the contributions made to each council person. In other words, instead of looking at those, the applicant or the person who's appearing or their subcontractors or their subcontractors, instead of that resulting in a recusal, all you do is you have a disclosure, and the disclosure comes at the very meeting where the matter is to be considered. And then the public can judge for themselves in terms of what the councilman says and that information. Again, I don't know whether you've anticipated this problem of causing the council not to be able to act on any matter because of contributions made a year before the matter appears before them.
That is a very interesting.
That's a very good point.
How about just being able to return the contribution?
Let me point out a couple of things, and as I guess the saying goes, from the mind of a lawyer. There was actually a California Supreme Court case dealing with what I call one of the Topanga-related cases. One was a significant case on findings, but another one dealt with that very issue, where the court noted that through nefarious means that this was an environmental group that could actually make contributions to each council member and essentially effectively recuse them if campaign, and it was a little bit different context because they were talking about whether campaign contributions were sources of income for purposes of disqualification. And the court actually talked about that. That's one of the reasons why what you have before you in our current ordinance is only those individuals that have applications pending, not any citizen that's going to come before you to advocate or as a citizen. Likewise, with lobbyists, you're going to only when you're going to limit them, it's only going to be based on the fact that they actually, for a fee, come and attempt to influence you, either for a fee or in combination with a fee and a number of contacts. So you do start narrowing it down. Professor Zavos' points are very good. Current state law, for example, with housing authorities, as I recall, and I'd have to take a look at the section to once again reconfirm it, but I do recall that does require a disclosure if some of the $250 limit, if they come before a housing authority for a contribution, it requires recusal by council members. In addition, like the FPPC does with conflicts of interest, they allow for the drawing of lots or straws for a necessary vote. Rule of necessity, exactly. So there are ways to address some of those, but the points are well taken, and certainly there are alternatives, as Mr. Zavos suggests, such as public disclosure.
I do like the public disclosure suggestion if we're going to allow. So I'm a little confused because I wasn't sure whether what you were suggesting originally was that it would be a year before you would have to recuse yourself, and now you're saying it's only if you have an application pending.
Well, what I would try to bring before you is a suggestion made by Councilmember Najarian, and that is limit if it's a campaign contribution provided a year before a vote, then the council members are recused from voting on that project where the applicant has provided you with a campaign contribution. If you've already voted, but the campaign, then that starts the clock running for a further year where they cannot provide a campaign contribution. And I was going to meld that with the current ordinance, which limits that to only persons with applications pending. In other words, an appeal before the council or a matter that's going to jump directly from an application to GRA staff directly to you.
So you're saying
so
that
it would be
an
limited.
application pending within that year?
Within that year.
But I would like to add, though, that if they didn't have an application pending and they come into us and we've received a contribution, then it must be publicly disclosed. And I would even think that we should do that at the meeting. I think that would...
And I believe we can do that. I mean, there may be some practical issues, but we can get, as Mr. Zavos noted, the issue of disclosure, whether it's in the form of actual formal registration or required disclosure, courts generally don't have a problem. Even the Citizens United case, which struck down limits on campaign expenditures by corporations and the like, which everybody basically decried as being a huge problem, that corporations can spend millions of dollars in campaign expenditure. It's protected by the First Amendment. The court still upheld requirements for disclosure. And so that, notwithstanding what some view as an assault against these attempted regulations, whether at the federal, state, or local level, to limit campaign expenditures and the influence that money has in elections, the court seems to be fairly unified behind the notion of disclosure. So we have a lot more latitude, I think, in that than we do in some other areas that are continually getting narrowed down by the courts. For example, I didn't put anything in the report about, like Los Angeles Measure H dealt with, I did attach a copy of the entire measure, with public financing of campaigns. The level playing field provisions of public financing of campaigns is poised to be struck down in Arizona by the U.S. Supreme Court. Based on the oral arguments, there's almost no question that's going to be struck down. So
Public financing of campaigns will be struck
no,
down?
not in its entirety. Arizona's law is like similar to many other states that where if there's going to be public financing, if I'm a individual that's just going to put up money for a campaign and I need to have a level playing field and I can draw on public monies that may be placed in a fund for that to bring me up to a level playing field, the Supreme Court has already indicated pretty clearly that that's going away. Just like the millionaires, they call the millionaires exception, the court struck that down. They just keep chipping away at these. And again, I'm not judging it. It's the way they interpret the First Amendment and its applications to campaign expenditures. And that kind of maybe, if I can wrap this up, maybe this brings me to the last. Please do. Well, it brings me to, maybe, well, it's the last issue, and it's kind of a quick one because it's one I recommend.
Perky today.
He's been working on this now for months. Let him have his moment, okay?
It's not really a moment. I enjoy it. I truly do.
That's obvious. That's the problem. He enjoys it too much.
I can slug through it if you like.
Hold on.
Let
me take a picture while he's enjoying it. Continue enjoying it, please. Thank you.
When we enacted the campaign contribution limits in 2009, we limited loans by candidates to their campaigns to $5,000. I'm recommending that we eliminate that.
Yes.
There's been a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals decision which found that to be on the same level as an expenditure and therefore unconstitutional. I actually did a survey on that, and I believe it was.
I agree. Let's remove that.
That
alone as much as you want to yourself.
Yeah, and that's my recommendation. One, because I think it's unconstitutional, and two, that every city
I thought it was unconstitutional. How can you limit?
There was no Ninth Circuit decision which controls California on that. And this was before the Citizens United case. So I looked at the Sixth Circuit opinion and analyzed it and thought that it's
never mind.
If you're in front of the Supreme Court, you get like 3 minutes. Scott, is that?
They would sidetrack me with questions, is what they would do.
And not to draw this out any longer, but I just want to be sure that we kind of deal with everything. So as part of this, that we will now be keeping require lists of subcontractors who contract for a certain amount of money from all of these, different contractors who do business with the city. But what about people that are coming in for entitlements? So if you have a developer who wants entitlements for their new development, do we also then but they're not contracting with us, they're just asking for an entitlement. Are we also going to limit any subcontractor who works with them?
Well, as I noted in the report, there's a little bit of difficulty with the subcontractors. You got part of that answer today with, I think, the presentation you had this afternoon on this second pro forma at the point in time where, at that point, we can require a list of subcontractors so we'll know who they are. But in talking with staff, and it was generally housing staff that I worked with in trying to flesh through that, there were some difficulties with when you identify these subcontractors, because many times the contractor is not going to identify their subs at an early point in a project because they're just not going to have that together. This is for direction, so I can take your direction back and start putting it together in either a subsequent report or in a draft ordinance at your leisure. Just give me direction, I'll do that. And go as far as we can with the whole issue of subcontractors, us providing notice on the front end, whether it's through a contractor list form or the like. That's something that I've indicated in the report.
Well, Mr. Allen had said something earlier that it's up to the candidate to know who gives them money, and I just want the public to understand that you may know who gives you money, but you don't know who they're working for. And even when it comes to city projects, take ADI. There was no list of who ADI was subcontracting with. And this is something the Glendale News Press got wrong. They said, well, a candidate could have done a public records request. No, that list did not exist. The city did not have that information. Correct, Mr. Howard?
That's correct. We actually prepared it based upon after-the-fact requests.
After the fact. So it's something that we need to be sure to have those lists to protect candidates, because it's not that you don't know, you see XYZ drywall, you know what XYZ drywall is, but you would have no way of knowing, have they done work for Habitat for Humanity, have they done work for any developer, or have they done work for someone who's just coming in and asking for an entitlement. So we need to know how far we're going to go, if it's any subcontractor, or do they have to hit a certain monetary threshold, and are we just talking about contractors that are contracting with the city or accepting city funds in some way, or is it any contractor who works for any developer or anybody who comes in for land use? For instance, what if somebody is doing work on a home that's gone for a DRB approval? I mean, do you have to go that far to where you say, well, we affirmed a DRB decision when it came to us for on appeal, we affirmed the decision, but I got money from the guy who wants to build the wing of that house. You know, does that person now have to, you have to recuse yourself? So we have to decide, I think, what the threshold is there.
What I can do to aid without belaboring this is come back to you with a more focused report on this whole subcontractor issue. Kind of lay out a monetary threshold. I noted Measure B and Measure H have them. We have a $25,000, and start maybe cutting away at some of the broader areas and bring it down to something that's manageable and reasonable. Because you're not going to want to try to, like you said, somebody comes in, they have the subcontractor do the framing on a wing of a house for DRB. Probably not going to want to address that because, again, the evil sought to be addressed is just not readily apparent.
But I would like to find ways of limiting the amount of money that comes in from people who are routinely coming to the city for entitlements. Large, developers who work on a lot of projects, brokers, real estate agents. That's where I think that lobbyists. I think that's where. That's where the issue is in my mind. It's not, the person who one time is, happens to come in front of you for something. It's people that are doing this people who are doing this as a business and have a real financial incentive to be giving money to candidates. That's where I would like to see us be as strict as we can possibly be. Mr. Starbird.
The issue of contractors that may be working on housing projects or those individuals involved in entitlements. But Scott, will this extend to city general contractors? Let's say a consulting contract, a public works construction contract. Will we need to begin to publish our vendor lists, for example?
My recommendation on what I call the typical low bid contract is no. Most cities exempt those because it's essentially a ministerial process. It may have to come to the council on a consent calendar, for example, but it's a low bid because it's a required low bid contractor, both under state law and our charter.
This evening, where we don't have bids, where we have sole source, we have extension of existing contracts, we have public service contracts that are not bid, but they're consultants. Will we need to maintain lists of those for the council?
My recommendation would be yes, at monetary thresholds. You don't want to set it too low because then you capture, like some council members noted, the minor ones. But whether it's a $25,000 figure or like Los Angeles has is $100,000.
Okay, so we tend to think of the contracts as land use entitlement, not contracts, but land use entitlements and housing contracts, development contracts, redevelopment, development contracts. But this will have broader ramifications into our other general city contracts that we'll need to maintain lists on, depending on the limits that are set.
And given that this is bound to be a very long list of people, will we be able to give our list of contributors to legal and have you run those for us so that we don't, oh my God, I approved something on consent and I got $100 from the person's wife?
I'm not sure we want to give us a legal, but we'll work out some way of doing it. For example, Pasadena requires that the list be posted on their website.
Yeah, we should be able to create some kind of a program that will post all the vendors by name, maybe address, in which case you could go in and do a query, input your list, and see if there's a match anywhere.
Okay.
We should be able to develop something like that that'll ease the review process.
And that's something, that's essentially the next evolution of where we are in our current ordinance now. We do prohibit campaign contributions from contractors. We're looking at extending it to subcontractors and creating this database or other types of noticing so that you have information, contractors have information, and of course we have the other issues involving lobbyists. But that's, if I hear or no objection or you agree, I'll start pulling that down because I think that this has been very good. It's helped me pull a lot of these things down into something that we can focus on so that hopefully ultimately in the next few months come up with an ordinance that meets with your approval.
And are we going to pick a date certain for the lobbyist issue? Or are we just going to wait until you can find room? Because I know we don't have a council meeting in 2 weeks. I'm not here next week.
No, actually, month of May, you don't have any time to take up additional topics because I think we have a council member missing on at least most, if not all, of the May meetings. So June, you're going to be very much into budget. My suggestion would be this come back after the first of the fiscal year.
Okay, and meanwhile, you can start preparing an ordinance based on the direction we gave you today.
Yeah, very helpful, and I appreciate it. And I understand it was kind of long-winded, and I may get a little overly excited about it. And Yeah, I'm sure.
God, it was great.
But I appreciate your patience and thank you. There was a lot to bite off, and I recognize that going in.
Okay. What's next, please?
Next is oral communications. And discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to a speaker, but there'll be no debate or decision. And the city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and a report.
Okay. Before I call my first speaker, who I know is here, I just wanted to make just to call out for Margaret Hammond and Charles Hooker, who I saw leave, but just in case they're somewhere in the building and can hear this, that we're on to oral communications.
Together?
Well, no, they left around the same time. I'm not going to say together. So I'm just letting them know if they're here that they should come back. Okay, Maro Yakubian is my only card. And thank you for waiting. Thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed Scott's presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Friedman, council members, city staff. I'd like to start off by first a heartfelt congratulations to Mayor Friedman for now taking the helm of what I think one of the finest cities in the state of California, and also congratulations to you, Councilman Manukian, for your election victory. My name is Maro Yakubian, and I'm a commissioner with the City of Glendale's Transportation and Parking Commission. And I am here today because I attended a 3-day seminar in San Diego last week, which was put on by the California Office of Traffic and Safety. Just so everyone knows, this was something that I paid out of pocket personally, because the issue that I wanted to go and hear about was the pedestrian and bicyclist safety and distracted driving issue, which is extremely important to me, and I know extremely important to the City of Glendale. There were 600 attendees at this event from throughout the state, from every corner of the state, and they included people from police departments and engineers and policymakers and community activists. And they were all there with one common goal, and that is to find out how they could make their city safer. I'm a little bit disappointed that I didn't get to speak earlier, because we had more people here in Chambers, and hopefully the viewing public can hear this. But I'm actually here to bring really good news, news that I think all Glendalians need to hear. Because while I was at this event, I had numerous people coming up to me when they saw my badge that I had come from Glendale, reaching out to just tell me how great they think Glendale is doing in the area of pedestrian bicycling safety. They were extremely impressed with various aspects of it. I mean, people were giving me different comments about what they thought, how they thought we were doing, a fantastic job. And, such people as, members of the San Francisco Police Department, the director of the Office in Traffic and Safety up there in Sacramento. And they were saying things like, we're watching you guys, we see what you're doing. And the fact of the matter is, the eyes are on us. Now, some of us in city staff who get a chance to travel beyond Glendale, I'm sure you hear these comments, but for me as a commissioner, this was really my first time to be outside of the city and hear such wonderful feedback from people from around the state. For instance, in one of the sessions, there was a PowerPoint presentation that was put on, and the City of Glendale was put up on the big screen on a PowerPoint presentation. Now, if this were 2 years ago, the City of Glendale in a traffic and safety presentation, one might think it was going to be used in a negative way. But in this instance, it was just the opposite. The City of Glendale was being used in a way to illustrate what great progress we're making in this particular instance, data collection on population density. One of the attendees there spoke out and said, well, that's great and wonderful, but how does that help? And ironically, at that moment, I had gotten a message from Colin Bogart when I had asked him what had happened the night before in Chambers, and he told me you had unanimously voted for the Safe and Healthy Streets plan. And I was able to raise my hand and tell everyone there that what actually does happen when you get bits and pieces together is that when the community works together is you get a comprehensive plan, and that's how it works. And the entire room broke out into applause, and I wish you were there to hear it, and I wish all the Glendale citizens were there to hear it, because sometimes when you're focused so closely on what's going on in your house, you don't really get to see the big picture. And as I'd like to say, as we in Glendale are putting the jigsaw puzzle together, there are many, many cities throughout the state who haven't even taken the pieces out of the box. So that's how I feel. And in closing, I'd like to just say the Glendale Police Department is so highly regarded throughout the state. I was getting and receiving so many comments. We had 4 officers that were in attendance there, people who were just impressed with their knowledge, with their observations, the way they participated, the way they contributed to the discussion. It really amazed a lot of people, again, from San Francisco. They were very impressed, actually wanted to take a couple of them onto their police force because of how they impressed them. So I think that we should be encouraging all of their endeavors 100%, because they are on the front line with the distracting driving issue. And the sobering stat is there that 23% of all accidents is a result of cell phone usage. And that's a new stat that came out, and I hope we give them our full support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Harry Zavos is my last card. Is anyone else who wants to speak? Please turn your card in now.
Council, my name is Harry Zavos. I am a resident of Glendale, and I'm here to make sure that my request at the last council meeting was correctly understood, and that I correctly understood Mr. Manukian's response, particularly since one council person thought that I was asking to be involved at the working level with the staff in the allocation of costs. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I indicated last time that the Wyndham report, prepared on behalf of the city, outlined legal ways in which lost charter-authorized water fee transfers to the general fund could be restored. One way was by finding areas where the general fund had expended resources on behalf of GWP and the waterworks without being reimbursed. If that were the case, then water fees could be transferred to the general fund by way of reimbursement, and that would be legal, and I agree it would be legal. Based on that report, the City Council authorized the staff to explore all possible areas where such reimbursement could take place. Beginning with that, I began appearing before the Council, indicating that fairness demanded that if you were going to look at uncompensated resources expended by the general fund on behalf of GWP, you need to look at unexpended or unreimbursed resources expended by GWP on behalf of the general fund. When I first began, I indicated that there are 4 areas which I couldn't confirm to be the case that constituted such expenditure of GWP resources without reimbursement. Subsequent to that time, I appeared at the March 7th GWP Commission meeting, and again, I asked if those 4 areas were areas where GWP resources were used for general funds purposes without any compensation to GWP. In response to the chairman, Mr. Steiger responded, and I think I'm quoting here, on the 4 subjects as to whether GWP was reimbursed, the answer is no. Now, last week, I, again, as I had before, asked the council to direct the staff to explore uncompensated water fees expended for general fund purposes as diligently as the staff was directed to look at general fund expenditures on behalf of the waterworks. This time I got an answer, and I appreciate that it came from Mr. Manukian. In making my point, I again raised those 4 areas. By way of example, I didn't intend that to be an exhaustive list. When I first started out, I didn't even know if they were true. I had to wait on Mr. Steiger's confirmation. And I certainly don't have the expertise, nor the resources, nor the data to explore all other areas where there may be expenditures by the waterworks and the GWP on behalf of the general fund or other departments where they're not reimbursed. I just don't have it. So I would ask whether Mr. Manukian's request is only with respect to those 4 areas or all possible areas, whether his request, like the request to explore uncompensated expenditures from the general fund, his request is to explore all possible uncompensated expenditures by the waterworks. Now, let me just say one more thing. I've said that fairness dictates that take place. I really believe that Proposition 218 does as well, and I'm sure when the city attorney has an opportunity to think about it and to do legal research, he can advise you, but let me indicate my reasoning. One of the areas, for example, where there's uncompensated resources is in the GWP building, the Perkins building. It was confirmed that, in fact, 2/3 of that building is being used by other departments, general fund departments, who don't pay any rent. Now, what happens is GWP could use that space, but because it's not available, because it's rent-free to other departments, they've had to go out and lease commercial space at a cost of the ratepayer. But that's the very thing that Proposition 218 prohibits. Rate fees, I will. Rate fees under Proposition 218 can only be used for the service for which they are collected. And to use those fees to lease commercial space in order for other departments to use rent-free the space in the GWP building, I think is violative of Prop 218.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or responses from staff or council? Okay.
Adjourn. Was that a question of me regarding the?
Yeah, yes, whether or not it's just those 4 areas are all possible.
No, I think it should include everything, in my opinion. Any issues that was brought up by that report, it should be included in there.
Okay, we have a motion to.
Yeah, I mean, here's my reaction. We'll place the matter on the ballot, or we'll bring it up during the budget, and you give us direction on it. All possible areas, I have no idea what that is, what that entails.
Not all possible areas. I'm talking about the report that was prepared. Right.
Yeah, that'll come back to you. Yes.
Right.
And specifically, the 4 areas that Mr. Zavos mentioned, we are exploring. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
There's second.
We are adjourned.
Third.